Chapter 2093. Let me tell you the secret of this cultivation art. The Will Heavenly Palace was unparalleled. To the outside world, becoming a true disciple of the Will Heavenly Palace was akin to ascending to the heavens in a single bound. However, it wasn't as simple as the outside world thought. There were actually differences between the so-called true inheritances. Preparatory true disciples, titled true disciples. There were 3 levels. In order to become a true disciple, one had to achieve the goal set by the Heavenly Palace within a set period of time. As for becoming a titled true disciple, it wasn't easy either. The difficulty was even higher. Since he was accepted as a disciple of the Will Heavenly Palace, he would naturally tell Chunzong all sorts of information about the Will Heavenly Palace. The Will Heavenly Palace was a collective name. It was located on the Will Heavenly Mountain. The Will Heavenly Mountain was extremely mysterious. It existed in this world, but also in the void. It was as small as a mustard seed, but also as small as a world of its own. The palace that Chunzong saw floating on top of the mountain was also an illusion. In short, the Will Heavenly Palace was beyond imagination. With Chunzong's current realm and cultivation, he couldn't see through it. The current Will Heavenly Palace was divided into 5 palaces: Will Palace, Heart Chun Palace, Heart Ju Palace, Heart Burning Palace, and Heart Palace. Heart Will Palace, Heart Chun Palace, and Heart Ju Palace were the first 3 palaces of the Will Heavenly Palace. Of course, the oldest one was the foundation of the Will Heavenly Palace. As for Heart Chun Palace and Heart Ju Palace, they were established after the Will Heavenly Palace. As for Heart Burning Palace and Heart Palace, they were established after the Will Heavenly Palace. Of the 5 palaces, Heart Palace was established the shortest. To be able to establish a new palace within the Will Heavenly Palace was no small matter. After all, the Will Heavenly Palace had existed for countless years and had given birth to many experts. However, up until now there were only 5 palaces. The foundation of the Will Heavenly Palace was the Will 33-layered heavens. Any disciple of the Will Heavenly Palace was qualified to cultivate the Will 33-layered heavens. According to the Heart Holy Man, the Will 33-layered heavens was the foundation, or rather, the main cultivation art of the Will Heavenly Palace. Only after reaching a certain level of mastery in the will one be able to cultivate the other cultivation arts of the Will Heavenly Palace. As for the cultivation techniques of the other 4 palaces, they were all self-created with the Heart 33 Heavens as the foundation. Only with the Heart 33 Heavens as the foundation could they display their might. Gradually, Chunzong also learned from some information that those who could create meridians, establish Tao, and open palaces were extraordinary. It was no wonder that Elder Ma looked so envious when Exin Tao Master proposed to accept him as a disciple. Of course, Chunzong still didn't fully understand the mystery, and wholehearted Tao Master wouldn't say too much. He just told Chunzong the basic situation that he should know. Most of the true disciples were temporarily listed under the Palace of Will, but they were not considered true disciples of the Palace of Will. Only those with titles were qualified to become true disciples of the Palace of Will. Of course, if those disciples were chosen by the other 4 palaces and were willing, they could also become true disciples. It was a pity that the cultivation techniques of the other 4 palaces were much more difficult than the Heart 33 Heavens. If they couldn't cultivate it, they wouldn't be able to enter the other 4 palaces. In the Heart Peace Palace, other than the Palace Master Exin Tao Master, there weren't any elders or protectors. There were only 5 true disciples, and one of them was Chunzong. Exin Tao Master brought Chunzong into a secret palace in the depths of the Heart Peace Palace. There was nothing else in the secret palace other than 5 lamps that were burning. One of the lights was at the top, and the second row had 4 lights. This is the Heart Light. Exin Tao Master smiled and said, "Every true disciple of the Heavenly Palace has to light up a heart light. If the heart light doesn't extinguish, the person won't die. In other words, if the heart light was extinguished, the person would die and his soul would disperse. Use your mind to light up the heart light. Exin Tao Master said to Chunzong, and took out a lightless lamp. Chunzong tried to mobilize the power of his mind and infuse it into the lightless lamp. In an instant, a flame ignited, and as the light flickered, it illuminated the surroundings. Chunzong felt that there was a faint connection between him and the heart light. It seemed weak, but it was very tenacious. When the light was extinguished, the person would die. In this way, Chunzong was a true disciple of the Heart Peace Palace. Take these and cultivate well. Exin Tao Master took out 3 pieces of spiritual jade of inheritance and handed them to Chunzong. Master. Chunzong took the spiritual jade of inheritance and said at the same time, I was born in the Lingwu Holy World. Due to an accident, I wandered into the void and couldn't find my way back. Master, you've been to the Lingwu Holy World before. Do you still remember? Lingwu Holy World. Exin Tao Master frowned slightly and pondered again. He said, It's been a long time. I need to think about it. If I remember, I'll tell you. For now, accept the basic inheritance of the Heart Peace Palace and cultivate well. Thank you for your trouble, Master. Chunzong bowed. As the 5th disciple of the Heart Peace Palace, Chunzong naturally had his own palace. The palace was very big, but he was the only one in it. It was a little lonely. However, the Heart Peace Palace was like this. Taking out 3 pieces of spiritual jade of inheritance, Chunzong began to accept the inheritance. The content of the first piece of spiritual jade of inheritance was the 33 heavens of will, the foundation of the Heart Peace Palace. Chunzong had obtained the first few heavens, or rather the first few transformations. The last few transformations were deduced by himself. Using them, he comprehended the Heart Sword Tao Will. Later on, it evolved into the Heart Sword Tao Will, which was closely related to the change of will. Chunzong also wanted to compare it with the transformations he created. He found that the change of will he created was too simple. At least, compared to the inheritance of the Heart Peace Palace. Chunzong had obtained the first few transformations and had also cultivated them. But now that he had obtained the complete transformation of will, the 33 heavens of will, Chunzong knew that he was still lacking. The 33 heavens of will was a cultivation technique. It was also called a cultivation technique or divine ability. For example, his Taichu sword energy technique was also a divine ability when he reached the spirit realm. Divine ability was a general term. It was also divided into cultivation techniques, martial arts, secret techniques, and so on. It represented a kind of level. Divine abilities were divided into high and low levels. The 33 heavens of will was a top divine ability. Cultivating it below the spirit realm and cultivating it above the spirit realm were 2 different concepts. In the spirit realm, 1 heart palace would be condensed after each heavenly layer was cultivated. When all the heavenly layers were cultivated, there would be 33 heart palaces. Cultivating the 33 layers of mind could calm one's mind. Every time one condensed a heart palace, one's mind would be strengthened. It could also provide one's mind with an extra layer of protection. It could also accommodate a divine power. Once the divine power was absorbed into the heart palace, it would be nourished by the heart palace. It would cultivate on its own and constantly improve its level. Moreover, when it was used, it would be accompanied by the power of the heart palace, making it even more powerful. Chunzong was astonished. Cultivating divine abilities in the spirit realm wasn't an endless process. Every divine ability involved one's spirit, chi, spirit, soul, and the Great Way. It had its own burden and upper limit. In addition, cultivating divine abilities also required time and energy. Thus, cultivators wouldn't cultivate divine abilities carelessly. They wouldn't cultivate divine abilities whenever they saw one. Instead, they would choose one. Otherwise, once they had cultivated many divine abilities and reached the upper limit, they would encounter a divine ability that they were satisfied with. However, they couldn't cultivate it because of the upper limit. No doubt, it would be very painful. At that time, of course, there were ways to solve it. They could either disperse some divine abilities or merge them. The former was harmful to the cultivator, while the latter was extremely difficult. However, if they cultivated the 33 heavens of will, they could condense 33 heart palaces. Not only could it strengthen the mind, but it could also further protect the mind. At the same time, it could also create more space for carrying divine abilities. The 33 heavens of will was just one divine ability, but it could carry 33 kinds of divine abilities. The more Chen Zong thought about it, the more shocked he was. What a divine ability! It was truly an amazing divine ability. Even the memories of Sword Master Dong Ting didn't contain such a profound divine ability. Chen Zong also felt that he was lucky to be able to inherit such a profound divine ability. No wonder the Will Heavenly Palace was the strongest faction in the void. With such a divine ability, it meant that they could master more divine abilities than others. Moreover, they could cultivate it on their own without needing to waste time and energy. Moreover, with the support of the Heart Palace, the divine ability would be even stronger. It could also strengthen and protect the mind. Chen Zong didn't dare to imagine what kind of existence could create such an amazing divine ability. Now that he had obtained such an amazing divine ability, it was also his good fortune. He should cultivate it well. Calming his mind, Chen Zong didn't immediately cultivate the 33 heavens of will. Instead, he took out the second spiritual jade of inheritance to receive the inheritance. The inheritance recorded in this spiritual jade was a universal divine ability of the Will Heavenly Palace. The so-called universal divine ability was a divine ability that any spirit realm warrior of the Will Heavenly Palace could cultivate. There weren't many common divine abilities recorded in the second legacy spirit jade, only a few. However, after Chen Zong read through them, a smile appeared on his face. The first divine ability was called Heart Flame. When there was fire in one's heart, it would burn. When the heart flame was strong, it would erupt with anger. When people were angry, they would erupt with greater strength and speed than usual. Therefore, this heart flame was a divine ability. After mastering it and activating it, it would allow one's strength and speed to be stronger than usual, thus increasing one's strength. In order to cultivate the flame of heart, one must first cultivate the 33-layered heavens of heart to a certain level. Only then would one be able to remain calm after using the flame of heart. Otherwise, one would be blinded by the anger of the flame of heart, lose all sense of reason, and turn into a mad demon. In the end, one's mind would be burned to death. Heart flame was a divine ability, but it didn't have a grade. Its power was closely related to the 33-layered heavens of heart. The more profound the cultivation of the 33-layered heavens of heart was, the more heart palaces were built, and the more heart palaces were built. After using heart flame, the more obvious the increase would be. The second universal divine ability was called Mind Lock. Mind Lock, as the name suggested, was to use the power of the mind to form a chain. After using it, it could lock the opponent's mind. If the opponent's mind was different from his own, he would be locked. If the opponent's mind was similar to his own, he would also be affected. This was when the opponent didn't have any means to resist. Once the mind was affected, the strength would also be affected, which would be fatal in a fight. The third universal divine ability was called Mind Slash. Chapter 2094. The fourth universal ability of the second legacy spiritual jade was called Mind Perception. Vision, smell, hearing, taste, touch, and so on were all inherent human abilities. It was just that some people were stronger than others. However, as one cultivated, one's 5 senses would continue to be strengthened. Similarly, among cultivators, some people's 5 senses were sharper than others, while others were slower. Outside of the five senses, there was also the sixth sense, also known as the sixth sense. The heart perception of the heavenly palace of will could be considered as the seventh sense. Mastering the heart perception of the heavenly palace of will would enhance one's five senses, making them sharper and more sensitive. It could also affect the sixth sense, making it sharper as well. On top of that, the heart perception could replace one's eyes and consciousness, allowing one to grasp one's surroundings to a shocking degree. Chen Zong felt that the heart perception was similar to the heart's eye that he had comprehended before, but it was more complete and profound. Heart flame, heart lock, heart slash, heart perception. These four abilities were the four universal abilities of the will heavenly palace. The other abilities of a higher level were all related to them. In other words, they were all created based on the four universal abilities. These four abilities were also the oldest abilities of the will heavenly palace, along with the will 33-layered skies. They were the foundation of everything. As such, the four universal abilities and the will 33-layered skies were also known as the five foundation abilities of the will heavenly palace. They might not be the strongest abilities of the will heavenly palace, but they were the most basic. They were passed down from generation to generation and were constantly perfected. There was no way to replace them. Any true disciple of the will heavenly palace would be able to cultivate all five of the foundation abilities. However, if one wanted to cultivate more of the will heavenly palace's abilities, they would have to join the various palaces. Of the five, the will heavenly palace was the most orthodox and the easiest to enter. Of the five palaces, the will heavenly palace had the fewest members. Including the palace master, the will heavenly lord, there were only 6 of them. First, the time required to open the palaces was relatively shorter. Second, the will heavenly lord's heavenly palace was much more difficult. The second piece of spiritual jade also contained the information left behind by the one-hearted holy man. It mentioned that the 33 heavens of heart was a must cultivate. As for the 4 universal abhijnas, it was not required to master all of them. This was because it was not something that could be mastered just because one wanted to. For example, some disciples might have an easy time cultivating the heart flame, but it would be difficult for them to cultivate other things. It was very difficult and filled with difficulties. It would take a lot of time, but it would be difficult for them to achieve great results. The one-hearted holy man suggested that after Chern Zong condensed his heart palace, he should try to see which common abhijna was easier to cultivate and focus on that one. However, Chern Zong was not in a hurry to start cultivating. Instead, he took out the third heritage spiritual jade. The third inheritance spiritual jade was the one-heart Tao inheritance of one-heart palace. Heart Sutra. At the beginning, Chern Zong was very clear that it was the Heart Sutra that he had cultivated. However, Chern Zong soon found that the Heart Sutra that he had obtained and cultivated at that time was only a small part of it, and it was the most basic part of it. It was like the introductory chapter of One Heart Tao. Back then, the One Heart True Lord had left behind this introductory chapter inheritance to see if there was a fated person who could obtain and cultivate it, and then come to the Heart Heavenly Palace. By chance, Chern Zong had obtained it and successfully cultivated it. He had even come here. Fate was just so ingenious. It was as if it was destined that Chern Zong would become a member of the Heart Heavenly Palace. Moreover, he would increase the number of members of the Heart Heavenly Palace and become the 5th successor disciple. The Heart Sutra that Chern Zong obtained previously was only the introductory chapter. The content after that was even more profound and difficult to cultivate. This was because the introductory chapter of the Heart Sutra cultivation was to divide the mind. The intention of this Heart Sutra was to control all thoughts with one heart. With one heart, I can control all thoughts with one heart. When Chern Zong read on carefully, he was extremely excited. Creating a technique like the One Heart Tao and One Heart Sutra was really amazing. Its profoundness was indescribable, and Chen Zong felt like he was looking up at a tall mountain. Multitasking. Chen Zong could do it, but the most he could do was multitasking. That way, it would not affect his concentration. However, the One Heart Sutra's one heart controlling all thoughts was extremely profound. When cultivated to the extreme, one would be able to control all thoughts with one heart. It was like using one heart to control all thoughts, and not simply dividing the mind to apply them. It was like one person becoming 10,000 people, and could think of 10,000 different questions. Thinking about it, Chen Zong felt a chill down his spine. At the same time, he felt an indescribable excitement. There was only one inheritance in the third spiritual jade, and that was the complete One Heart Sutra. However, this One Heart Sutra was the One Heart Tao of One Heart Palace, and encompassed everything. As for the rest, according to the information left behind by the One Heart Holy Man, Chen Zong could search for it in the Hall of Secrets of the Heart Heavenly Palace. The Heart Heavenly Palace had collected many supernatural powers. Some were collected from the outside world, and some were self-created. However, none of them were the true inheritance of the Heart Heavenly Palace. Anyone in the Heart Heavenly Palace was qualified to cultivate them. Master, is really amazing to be able to create such a brilliant technique like the One Heart Sutra. After receiving the inheritance, Chen Zong couldn't help but exhale. His heart was full of shock and admiration. It was really amazing. Now I'll cultivate the 33 layers of heart first, Chen Zong said to himself. Although he had cultivated the first few changes before, that was in the past. The real 33 layers of heart was suitable for the spirit realm to cultivate. The 33 layers of heart was similar to the Taichu sword energy technique, both of which were cultivation technique. However, each cultivation technique could only be cultivated in one. Cultivating more than one cultivation technique would conflict with each other. Of course, there were exceptions. Some special people or cultivation techniques could be cultivated at the same time. The cultivation techniques of the Heart Heavenly Palace were all special. Even if one had mastered other cultivation techniques, they could still cultivate the cultivation techniques of the Heart Heavenly Palace. With the previous experience, Chen Zong quickly entered the state of cultivation. Inside his body, outside his heart, streams of qi turned from invisible to tangible. They slowly condensed, shuttled, circled, and intertwined. That was the power of the mind. The power of the mind was formless, colorless, and tasteless. It couldn't be seen or touched. It was one of the most unpredictable powers. As for the cultivation of the 33 layers of heart, one must first sense the power of the mind, then control it and condense it to build the Heart Heavenly Palace. If one couldn't control the power of the mind, they wouldn't be able to cultivate the 33 layers of heart. To Chen Zong, condensing the power of the mind wasn't difficult at all. It was as easy as eating or drinking. Chen Zong usually paid attention to the sensing of the power of the mind. The power of the mind condensed into a tangible substance and quickly condensed. A simple outline of a palace was formed. As his mental strength continued to flow in, a simple palace was being built continuously, like a pile of bricks and tiles. It became increasingly clear and vivid. The first layer of the Heart Heavenly Palace, condensed. However, it wasn't condensed enough. It was only at the initial stage. It still needed to be condensed slowly. Only when it was completely condensed could the second Heart Heavenly Palace be condensed. When the first Heart Heavenly Palace was initially condensed, Chen Zong had a wonderful feeling. It was as if his mind had a home. It was like a prodigal son returning home. It was like a drifting boat entering a calm harbor. Most of the power of the mind that had been consumed to build the Heart Heavenly Palace was quickly recovering. To build the Heart Heavenly Palace, one had to use one's own power of the mind as nutrient. Naturally, it would be consumed when it became like brick. However, as long as the origin of the mind wasn't damaged, it could be recovered. Now that the first heart heavenly palace was completed, Chunzong let the origin of the mind enter the heart heavenly palace. The power of the mind that had been consumed was quickly recovered at a speed 10% faster than usual. Originally, Chunzong's power of the mind had recovered faster than many path-controlling realm experts. Now that it was 10% faster, it was even more astonishing. After the power of the mind recovered, it could be used to continue building the heart heavenly palace. It could be further perfected until it was completed. As for the second heart heavenly palace, there were usually two ways to cultivate it. One was to start building the second heart heavenly palace after the first one was built. However, it was more difficult to build. The other method was to wait until the first heart heavenly palace was completed and couldn't be improved any further before building the second heart heavenly palace. The difficulty would be much lower than the first method. Chunzong chose the second method. Next, Chunzong wasn't in a hurry to cultivate other methods. Instead, he focused on the cultivation of the 33 heavens of the heart heavenly palace. He wanted to build the first heart heavenly palace to completion and condense it to the extreme. The 33 heavens of the heart heavenly palace was the foundation. Only by building the foundation could he have a very solid and stable foundation. Time passed slowly. Chunzong didn't think much and immersed himself in the building of the heart heavenly palace. As for wholehearted Tao Master, he didn't just brush off Chunzong. Instead, he was really slowly searching for the memories of the past. After all, it had been a long time. Those memories had faded and he needed to recall them carefully. Moreover, Chunzong needed a clearer and more accurate route and direction. As his master, he had to do his best. 10 days after Chunzong entered the heart heavenly palace and was listed as the 5th successor disciple, the first heart heavenly palace was finally built to the extreme. It looked completely solid and emitted a layer of sparkling and translucent jade-like halo. It was very charming. Every detail was very clear and perfect. There wasn't the slightest feeling of roughness or carelessness. This was the heart heavenly palace that Chunzong had painstakingly built. The first heart heavenly palace was finally completed. My power of the mind as a whole has strengthened by 10%. Chunzong's eyes couldn't help but light up. It was very difficult to strengthen the power of the mind. He was also affected by the heart sword seal. After going through countless life and death situations, the fusion of souls, the cultivation of the heart heavenly chant, and the comprehension of the origin of the world. Only then did his mind break through the limit bit by bit and improve until today, surpassing the level of most Tao manipulation realm experts. At this level, it wasn't so easy to go further, unless there was a significant breakthrough in his cultivation realm. But now, his cultivation was still in the first rotation of the Tao manipulation realm, but his mind had been strengthened by 10%. It was undoubtedly amazing. Chapter 2095. The difficulty of forging the second heart palace was indeed much higher than the first heart palace, but it was not difficult for Chunzong. Firstly, Chunzong's mind was very strong. Secondly, the first heart palace was completed. Another 10 days passed and Chunzong successfully completed the second heart palace. Now, he was starting on the third heart palace. After another 10 days, Chunzong completed the third heart palace. However, Chunzong did not continue to cultivate the 33 heavens of mind. Instead, he began to cultivate the heart flame superpower. Once he started cultivating, Chunzong felt like a fish in water. In just a few days, he reached the entry level of the heart flame superpower. Using the power of his mind as the fire seed, he condensed a small flame. The flame was light red, like a candle flame. Now I'll try the mystery of the heart palace, Chunzong said to himself. With a thought, the small flame floated and entered the first heart palace. In the heart palace, Chunzong's mind-spirit origin had already moved out of the heart palace. It was in the 3 heart palaces, and was enveloped by the light emitted by the 3 heart palaces. It was also stabilized, strengthened, and protected. When the heart flame entered the first heart palace, it trembled slightly. It was as though a breeze had blown past, swaying gently. As it swayed, it seemed to have become even more vigorous. Strands of formless aura surrounded the heart flame. When Chernzong sensed it carefully, he had a very strange feeling. The heart flame was condensing on its own, as if it was cultivating and comprehending on its own. Of course, there was still a difference in efficiency compared to wholeheartedly comprehending and cultivating. Feeling it carefully, it was about 10%. This was very amazing. After all, it was equivalent to comprehending and cultivating all the time. The overall efficiency was not much worse than wholeheartedly comprehending and cultivating. After all, it was impossible for him to put all his thoughts and energy into cultivating. In that case, there are 2 more heart palaces. I'll try the other 3 superpowers. Chernzong said to himself, his eyes shining. In the end, when Chernzong tried Heartlock, he found that it was difficult to get started. Then, he tried Heart Slash, but it was also difficult to get started. Of course, if one was willing to spend a lot of time and energy, they might be able to get started. However, Chernzong gave up on that for the time being. Instead, he tried mind perception, and he succeeded. The illusory eye formed by the heart perception was light green in color. It had an indescribable depth and loftiness, like the divine firmament and the 9 underworlds. The moment the mind perception god eye formed, Chernzong felt a unique cool energy spread out and fused with his 5 senses, slowly nourishing and strengthening them. Even his senses were strengthened. Chernzong sent the heart perception god eye into his 2nd heart palace so that he could slowly comprehend, cultivate, and condense it. In the following cultivation, Chernzong decided to practice the Heart Sutra. He had already cultivated the rudimentary chapter of the Heart Sutra, so it should be easier for him to cultivate it. And if he could get started with the Heart Sutra, just like the heart flame and mind perception, he could send it into the heart palace of the 33 heavens of the heart and cultivate it on his own, saving him a lot of time. As long as he got started, the heart palace could help him cultivate. It was like using a cheat. The Heart Sutra was divided into 5 realms, 5 layers. First layer, heart and mind. Second layer, heart and mind 10 intense. Third layer, heart and mind 100 intense. Fourth layer, heart and mind 1000 intense. Fifth layer, heart and mind 10 intense. However, of the 5 realms of the Heart Sutra, only the first 4 layers existed. As for the 5th layer, it was still a theory and had not yet been created. Chernzong began to cultivate the 1st layer, heart and mind. It was very easy to understand and also relatively easy to cultivate. The so-called heart and mind meant that one was completely focused. There was nothing else. It represented incomparable focus, extreme focus, a focus that required one to pour everything into it. Focus. Anyone could do it, but extreme focus, and for a long period of time at all times, was extremely difficult. Most people could only maintain extreme focus for a short period of time. Moreover, they needed some time to prepare first. Once the heart and mind was mastered, one could enter the state of extreme focus in an instant. As long as the power of the mind was not exhausted or removed by oneself, one could always maintain the state of extreme focus. The state of extreme focus had great benefits, whether it was comprehending, cultivating, or fighting. Chernzong found that the state of heart and mind was similar to the state of freedom, but there were also differences. Until now, Chernzong had gradually gained more experience, especially after he had obtained the memories of Sword Master Dong Ting. After slowly sorting them out, he understood one thing. The state of freedom was not something that all the sky prides of the void could master, because it was a secret technique that belonged to the eternal battle fort. Previously, he had thought that it was a unique state that anyone could comprehend. However, he had misunderstood. Only the disciples of the eternal battle fort could master it. After all, from what he knew, the sky prides who came to the eternal battle fort with their consciousness had first found an opportunity, passed the test of the opportunity, and mastered the state of freedom. Only then could they obtain the opportunity and come to the eternal battle fort with their consciousness. Chunzong found that mastering the secret of the state of freedom would allow him to better master the state of heart and mind. Moreover, he had already mastered the introductory chapter of the heart and mind, so it was not difficult for him to cultivate the state of heart and mind. Chunzong was very interested in this cultivation technique that had the same name as his first move of the heart and mind sword. In just 3 days, Chunzong had mastered the first level of the heart and mind sword and reached the introductory level. However, Chunzong was disappointed to find that the heart and mind sword could not be placed in the heart palace, because the heart and mind sword was also a cultivation technique. The cultivation technique could not be placed in the heart palace to comprehend and cultivate. It was a flaw of the heart palace. However, everyone was willing to accept such a flaw. Unfortunately, only the disciples of the heart palace were qualified. Master summoned him. Chunzong immediately left the palace and went to the heart and mind palace. Disciple, I thought about it for a while and finally remembered. However, it has been too long and I am not very sure. I can only give you the general direction. You still need to find it yourself, Heart Holy Master said and handed Chunzong a compass. There were dots on it like stars. Chunzong recognized it at a glance. It was an astrolabe. The star atlas was used by the Void spaceship, while the astrolabe was used by cultivators to record the position of the star world in the void and so on. Both the star atlas and the astrolabe were valuable. Moreover, the astrolabe was relatively rare and expensive. Thank you, Master. Chunzong took the astrolabe and bowed to express his sincere gratitude. How has your cultivation been in the past month? Heart Holy Master asked. The astrolabe was valuable, but it depended on who it was used to. For Heart Holy Master, it was nothing. Master, I have built 3 heart palaces. I have mastered the heart fire and heart perception, and the first level of the heart and mind sword. Chunzong answered honestly. Of course, Chunzong did not know what this meant. Or rather, what kind of cultivation speed was this? The single-hearted holy man had been calm and collected at first, but when he heard Chunzong's words, his eyes widened. He stared at Chunzong with a look that said, "Don't try to fool me. I'm not that easy to fool." In an instant, Heart Holy Master returned to his calm and unfathomable self, as if the shock was just an illusion. Well, this is not bad. But remember, you cannot be impatient. Heart Holy Master said meaningfully, the corners of his eyes twitching. The cultivation of the heavenly palace is closely related to the mind. If you are not careful, you may develop an inner demon. If the inner demon appears, it will be a life and death crisis. Hearing Heart Holy Master's words, Chunzong's expression turned serious. Inner demon. Instinctively, Chunzong felt that this inner demon might be the drawback of the will heavenly palace. While cultivating the mind and strengthening it, it may also develop an inner demon. If you rush for quick success, the inner demon will appear and endanger yourself. You don't have to worry. As long as you have a good foundation, it will be hard for the inner demon to appear. Heart Holy Master changed the topic. I will remember Master's teachings. Chunzong replied respectfully. Little did he know that at this moment, Heart Holy Master was extremely surprised and happy, because he seemed to have taken in an amazing disciple. Was this the ability of someone with a strong mental state? But his third direct disciple was also born with a strong mind, but his cultivation speed was not as fast. Heart Holy Master was still worried, but he still checked on Chunzong and found that his foundation was extremely solid and stable. It was very shocking. He was completely relieved, but the shock in his heart was even more intense. Heart Palace had an amazing disciple. He did not expect the opportunity left behind by Heart Holy Master to be so amazing. Of course, this was only for now. It was hard to say what would happen in the future. He could only say that he had the potential. Maybe Master's wish will be fulfilled. Heart Holy Master thought and then looked at Chenzong. Disciple, when are you going to return to your original world? Master, if I can leave now, then I will leave now. Chenzong did not hesitate. He had to go back as soon as possible and settle things as soon as possible. Heart Heavenly Palace was very attractive to him. That's good, go early and come back early. Now you are in the best period to build your foundation. Heart Holy Master nodded. I will take my leave. Chenzong was also a man of action. He left as soon as he said he would. He was ready to use the star core and drive the void escape to leave the black and white world quickly. He would then travel through the void again and again to leave the central void and head to the eastern void. Because he came from the eastern void. Wait. Heart Holy Master stopped Chenzong. I will open the Great Void Shift formation and send you to the eastern void. Hearing this, Chenzong was pleasantly surprised. Great Void Shift formation. It was recorded in the memory of Sword Master Dong Ting. It was an extremely advanced void shift formation that could travel through the void for long distances. If he directly used the Great Void Shift formation to return to the eastern void, it would only take a few breaths of time. It would save him a lot of time. Chenzong stood in the center of the Great Void Shift formation that was covered with dense and mysterious formation patterns. Heart Holy Master activated the formation. The formation started to operate and countless formation patterns lit up. Innumerable talismans condensed and flew in the air. They circled around and quickly shrank from the outside to the inside. In an instant, the dense formation patterns and talismans wrapped Chenzong. In the next breath, they shrank to a point and disappeared into the depths of the void. Chapter 2096. After killing the snake and a chicken, he could make a pot of dragon and phoenix soup. As the Great Void Shift formation was activated, its mysterious and unpredictable power was added to Chenzong's body. Chenzong seemed to be compressed into a speck of void dust and directly escaped into the void. Protected by the power of the formation, he was able to travel a long distance through the void. The power consumed by this kind of void transference was extremely shocking. Even if Chenzong released all the power of the star core fragment he possessed, it would be of no help. However, for Wholehearted Tao Master, the huge amount of energy consumed to activate the Great Void Shift formation was completely within his ability. But this time, there seemed to be an accident. The power consumption of the formation was beyond his imagination. Wholehearted Tao Master could not help but look solemn. Such a situation always meant an unforeseen event, and unforeseen events were usually not good. If he was not careful, his new disciple with outstanding talent was likely to be turned into void dust and die. However, Wholehearted Tao Master's strength was astonishing, and there was nothing he could do. He could only hope that his disciple was lucky enough to survive this crisis. At the moment of the Great Void Shift, Chenzong was still conscious. He could clearly feel an indescribable mystery. A sudden change occurred. The motionless heart sword seal once again burst forth with an astonishing devouring power, constantly devouring the power of the surroundings. The power of the Great Void Shift was constantly being devoured and replenished, causing the power of the formation to be consumed at an even faster rate. When the heart sword seal was constantly devouring the power of the Great Void Shift formation, in the void space at the bottom of the Heart Divine Mountain of Will Heavenly Palace, the broken long sword trembled slightly and emitted countless sword chi. Immediately, light flashed around the broken sword, and chains of the great Tao appeared. The chains tightly bound the sword, and the trembling of the broken sword gradually calmed down. However, a wisp of black aura, extremely fine, spread out from the broken sword. Escorted by a streak of sword chi, it directly tore through the void space and disappeared in an instant. In the eastern void, in a stretch of void space, there was nothing around except for the twinkling stars in the distance. Suddenly, a dot of light escaped from the depths of the void and spread out in an instant. Countless runes mixed with talismans revolved around it like chains, revealing a figure. When the chains gradually faded and disappeared, the figure completely solidified. It was Chunzong. Chunzong glanced around and then took out the astrolabe. He checked it with his divine sense and found that he was indeed in the eastern void. How long? How long had it been? Even though he wasn't sure, it should have been a very short period of time. From the Will Heavenly Palace in the black and white world, he had traversed through the boundless void and crossed an immeasurable distance to arrive at the eastern void. If he were to pilot the void vessel, even if he could unleash the speed and void travel of a top-grade void vessel, it would still take a lot of time. Through the astrolabe, Chunzong made a comparison. His master, wholehearted holy man, had already marked out the possible locations of the Lingwu holy world. All Chunzong had to do was to approach the marked location and search for it himself. However, there was still a considerable distance between his current location and the marked location. The Great Void Teleportation Formation directly sent him from the center of the central void to the eastern void, but it could not carry out a precise location. Taking out the void vessel, Chunzong entered the void vessel and set the final destination according to the astrolabe. Then, he took out the star core fragment and stuffed it directly into the furnace. Because there were no more high-grade flaming void crystals, not even mid-grade ones. Moreover, there were no more void coins. He had no choice but to use the star core. While piloting the void vessel, Chunzong cultivated the 33 heavens of will and built the fourth heart palace. Of the 3 completed heart palaces, one contained the heart flame theurgy, one contained the heart perception theurgy, and the last contained the great void escape theurgy. As for the great refining secret sword technique and the great refining void god eye, Chunzong had already learned the basic. However, it was not so easy to further improve his realm. If he cultivated by himself, it would probably take a lot of time and energy. However, if he could build a few more heart palaces and put a bunch of theurgies into them, he could cultivate by himself. The overall cultivation efficiency would not be much worse than if he cultivated by himself. Therefore, building the heart palace was the foundation. Chunzong also found that after the trip to the heart palace, there were more things he needed to cultivate. To a certain extent, it could be seen that the strength of the heart palace was in the later stages. The cultivation in the early stages was more difficult and slow, and its strength was relatively less outstanding. However, once the cultivation reached the later stages, its power would gradually be revealed and would become stronger. This was also the reason why the Heart Palace could dominate the void and claim to be number 1. No one dared to compete with them. Of course, Chunzong was not an orthodox disciple of the Heart Palace. He was different from the disciples who entered the Heart Palace at a young age. The difficulty of building the fourth Heart Palace was far greater than the previous 3. Even with Chunzong's ability, it was difficult to build it in a short time. It's because my cultivation is too low. Chunzong could not help but think. The first revolution of the Tao control realm was indeed the lowest level in the spirit realm. When the Heart Palace Master heard that such a cultivation could build 3 Heart Palaces and achieve great success, his shock was indescribable. However, he did not say it out loud. Chunzong also did not communicate with the other true disciples of the Heart Palace, so he did not know what it meant. Although it was difficult to build the 4th Heart Palace, Chunzong still made progress bit by bit. However, it would take a lot of time to reach the entry level. This was also because Chunzong was distracted by driving the escapee. Chernzong found that it was easier to fly at the maximum speed of the high-grade void flying ship than before. This was because he had built 3 heart palaces. His mind was invisibly stronger, so the upper limit of his load was higher. Extreme flying and void travel. The escapee was constantly approaching its destination. However, it was still far away and would take a lot of time. Time passed slowly. During this time, Chernzong also encountered some interceptions. However, Chernzong did not want to waste time and directly drove the escapee to get rid of them. The 3rd level of the spirit realm was called the Transcendent Realm. The maximum speed of the high-grade void flying ship was faster than some Transcendent Realm cultivators. Transcendent Realm cultivators were called Perfected Lord. In the void, they were powerhouses who could oversee a region. Think about the Yuan sect, which sat on 2 galaxies, but it was unknown if their strongest powerhouse had reached the Transcendent Realm. In short, there were very few Transcendent Realm powerhouses in the Nebula Grade forces. Only in the Nebula Grade forces would there be more Transcendent Realm powerhouses. As for Tao Venerables, there were no such existences in the lower Nebula Grade forces. Such powerhouses would not appear if there was no need. As for Tao Manipulation Realm and Yuan Underworld Realm powerhouses, they simply could not chase after the escapee. Of course, if he was not in a hurry, Chernzong might have flown out of the escapee and fought with those Tao Manipulation Realm powerhouses. After all, his current strength was definitely stronger than before. The location marked by the wholehearted Tao Venerate on the astrolabe was within the Yuan galaxy. This was not much different from Chernzong's guess. However, the scope of a galaxy was very vast. Even though Chernzong's cultivation had reached the Tao Manipulation Realm, it was still the same. The power of that star core was indeed very astonishing. It was at least equivalent to thousands of high-grade void flaming crystals, or even better. Crossing one galaxy after another, they crossed one nebula after another. The void was divided into 5 directions: east, west, north, south, and central. Each direction was very vast and contained many nebulas. For example, there were dozens of nebulas in the eastern void. Some of these nebulas were ruled by powerful forces, but some were more chaotic and did not have a clear ruler. The route that Chernzong had chosen was the shortest and safest after taking into account all the factors involved. Time passed slowly. When Chernzong completed the initial condensation of the 4th Heart Palace, the escapee had also flown through the nebula and officially entered the Yuan galaxy. Returning to the Yuan galaxy once again, Chernzong felt a little emotional. Back then, when he fought with Heavenly God Gong, he was swallowed by the void behemoth Black Serpent. Using the power of the eternal Heaven and Earth token, he temporarily gained the power of the imminent deity realm. By chance, he went to the 2nd city of Suppressing World and found a relatively safe place to stay. He got some opportunities in the nebula and his foundation became more solid and his strength increased. Therefore, Chernzong still had some feelings for the 2nd city of Suppressing World in the Yuan galaxy. In addition, some people in the 2nd city of Suppressing World had helped him a lot. In theory, since he had returned to the Yuan galaxy, he should make a trip to the 2nd city of Suppressing World. However, after thinking about it, Chernzong decided not to go for the time being. Everything would wait until he returned to the Tianyuan Sacred Realm and left there. After making up his mind, Chernzong did not adjust the route of the voyage. He continued to fly quickly and activated the void travel again. The 2nd city of Suppressing World was also left behind. Not long after, the escapee flew past the place where Chernzong had boarded the heavy vanguard and continued to fly forward. After a while, Chernzong was slightly startled. Through the escapee, he saw a figure outside. It was a giant black serpent that was thousands of meters long. It was swimming in the nebula. "It's it." Chernzong's expression suddenly changed. The giant black serpent was the giant serpent that had swallowed him in one bite. When he saw the giant serpent again, Chernzong felt a little emotional. Of course, Chernzong did not hate the giant serpent. The giant serpent was a void behemoth. Void behemoths were born without human emotions. They advocated natural selection, especially snake-type void behemoth. It was in their nature to swallow him. In addition, he was able to obtain these opportunities because he had been swallowed by the giant serpent. Although he did not hate it and felt a little emotional, Chernzong still stopped the escapee, appeared directly, and quickly flew toward the giant serpent. No matter what, he had almost died in the past because of the giant serpent. Therefore, this grudge had to be resolved so that his mind could be clear. The flesh and blood of the void beast was also a great supplement. It was only right for him to bring some gifts back if he wanted to return. As for the mantis blade giant serpent's flesh, Chernzong had already eaten it clean. Chapter 2097. Leaving home at a young age, who can tell if I'm male or female when I'm old? Fight. Chernzong and the void beast Black Snake began a battle. A great battle. But Chernzong soon discovered that the Black Snake's strength was obviously not as strong as the mantis blade snake that was killed by the evanescent. Even so, the Black Snake's strength was not weak. After all, it was at the Earth rank. Ordinary Dao manipulation realm cultivators between the first and third rank were probably no match for it. Although Chernzong's cultivation was only at the first rank, his strength was so strong that ordinary fifth-rank cultivators were no match for him. However, the void beast's body was huge, and its body was tough. Its defense was shocking, and it had unparalleled strength and vitality. Even if one was stronger than it, it would be very difficult to defeat it. After a round of probing, Chernzong burst out with all his strength. He raised his sword, and starlight shone in all directions. A shocking pressure spread out, suppressing everything. Heaven Mystique, great refining star across space secret sword. The inheritance of the Will Heavenly Palace did not have any direct attack martial art. They were all cultivation methods and mystique. Moreover, the two mystiques that Chernzong had learned, Heart Flame, were of the amplification type, and Heart Perception was of the perception type. Neither of them had direct attack power. The refined star across space sword slashed down. The void beast Black Snake was immediately suppressed by the domineering sword, and it kept roaring in resistance. However, the power of the sword was very strong. It directly injured it but did not kill it. Back then, Chernzong used the Eternal Heaven and Earth token to temporarily burst out the power of the Dao manipulation realm. It was relatively easy to break the body of the giant snake from the inside, and that power was not weak. After being broken from the inside, the giant snake suffered more serious injuries, which also affected its speed. That was why Chernzong was able to successfully escape. Otherwise, the giant snake at its peak would be very scary. It's not dead. Looking at the injured and bleeding giant snake, Chernzong frowned slightly. He was shocked by the void beast's shocking vitality. Then, I'll try the amplification of Heart Flame. In an instant, the flame in his heart surged and the small flame became intense. It burned fiercely like a raging inferno that could burn everything. A shocking anger suddenly erupted, as if it wanted to swallow Chernzong's rationality. But in an instant, the anger was restrained and could not affect Chernzong at all. However, Chernzong could clearly feel waves of power surging from the depths of his soul and body. That power seemed to be limitless. First layer of strength, double strength, triple strength. A total of 3 layers of power emerged, causing Chernzong's overall strength to increase by 30%. Compared to the absolute breaking secret technique, a 30% increase was still not as good. However, the absolute breaking secret technique was only a minor divine ability, so it could no longer increase his strength. In addition, the strength of the heart fire was closely related to the cultivation level of the 33 layered heavens of will. Its potential was astonishing. If he could cultivate all of them and forge 33 heart palaces, he would be able to increase his strength by 33 levels, which was 33%, more than 3 times. Furthermore, the increase in cultivation level would not weaken the amplification of the heart flame. The stronger he was, the stronger he was. Let's try this sword. Chen Zong's eyes shot out shocking starlight, as if they were about to explode. He raised his sword, and endless starlight surged. Secret Sword of the Colossal Shatterer. This was similar to the Secret Sword of the Colossal Shatterer, one of the few great secret swords of the Starry Tao College. However, the Colossal Shatterer focused on suppression, while the Secret Sword of the Colossal Shatterer focused on destructive power. The sword slashed down, and the starlight instantly exploded, landing on the giant snake's body. It was like a star exploding, and an extremely terrifying power erupted. This sword focused on destructive power, and with the amplification of the heart fire, its power was even stronger. However, it still did not kill the giant snake. The third sword, Triple Heart Flame, the power of the Taichu Sword Origin Body, Secret Sword of the Colossal Shatterer. It was even more powerful, and the sword slashed down as if it could destroy stars. The giant snake finally died. Looking at the giant body, Chen Zong finally heaved a sigh of relief. Void beasts were really terrifying. Fortunately, this giant snake was much weaker than the mantis blade giant snake. Otherwise, he would not be its match, and he would have to use the escapee to kill it. After the heart fire recovered, Chen Zong felt a sense of emptiness in his heart. That was because he had used up a lot of his mental strength. However, compared to the side effects of the Secret Sword of the Colossal Shatterer, the side effects of the heart fire were obviously smaller, and the duration was longer. It was not instantaneous. With a slight smile, Chen Zong put away the giant snake's body and quickly returned to the escapee. This battle was very intense, but it did not last long. It ended in less than 15 minutes. Naturally, Chen Zong also obtained a giant beast crystal. The giant snake's tendons were also very valuable, and the snake's skin was also very valuable. Its flesh and blood contained rich power, and it was more or less beneficial to those in the illuminating God realm, let alone those below it. Now, it was time to start searching for the Lingwu sacred world. He opened the astrolabe. It seemed that he was not far away. Search. Chen Zong began to search continuously. However, the Lingwu sacred world seemed to be very secretive. Otherwise, it would have been found long ago. The target location given by the wholehearted Holy Master was not so precise. It was just a general area which was not small. Time passed slowly. 10 days passed. Chen Zong searched carefully, as if he was searching every inch of the area, but he still did not find it. Another 10 days passed, and he still did not find it. Chen Zong could not help but feel a little uneasy. Could it be that the location given by the Master was wrong? Of course, it was not that the wholehearted Holy Master deliberately gave him the wrong location, but that even he did not remember it clearly. It was just a general idea, and there might be a deviation. In the void, a slight deviation would bring about a huge difference. However, things had already come to this point. Chen Zong was also very helpless. He had no choice but to continue searching. He would spend more time trying. If he still could not find it, perhaps he could only go to the Void Temple to try his luck. However, it was not that easy to go to the Void Temple, because the Void Temple was not in the Eastern Void. It was in the Northern Void. If he wanted to go to the Void Temple, he would have to spend a lot of time without the Great Void Shift formation. Looking for the Void Temple was a follow-up plan. As for now, he would spend more time looking for it. Search and see. Time passed slowly. Another 10 days passed. Chen Zong still did not find it, but he was not anxious or discouraged. His mind became more and more calm. Another half a month passed. Chen Zong felt a surge of Tao power in his body. It was the Tao power of the Heart Sword principle. he hurriedly stopped searching and calmed down to carefully comprehend it. In the Spirit Sea, the second pattern on the sword light of the heart sword principle slowly condensed and formed. Second turn of the Tao manipulation realm. He did not expect that he would unexpectedly break through to the second turn of the Tao manipulation realm before he found the Lingwu sacred world. For a time, even his divine consciousness became more powerful. However, in terms of body refining, he did not break through the great Tao of the world. After stabilizing, Chen Zong continued to search. Because of the breakthrough in his cultivation, his divine consciousness became stronger, and his sixth senses became sharper. Similarly, his perception of the void improved a lot. Carefully sensing, every inch of the void was searched by Chen Zong. He did not miss anything. As time passed, Chen Zong searched more and more places. The area marked by wholehearted Tao Master became smaller and smaller. If he still could not find the remaining areas, Chen Zong might really have to consider leaving and going to the Void Temple. Even with Chen Zong's improved state of mind after the breakthrough, he could not help but feel a little nervous. After taking a deep breath, Chen Zong rested for a while and started to search again. As he searched, an indescribable feeling emerged from the depths of his heart. It was very subtle, but also very clear. Chen Zong could clearly feel it. Chen Zong raised his eyebrows and a smile appeared on his face. This feeling seemed to be that he was about to find the Lingwu sacred world. Sure enough, under Chen Zong's efforts, after a quarter of an hour, he saw a vague outline. It was difficult to find without approaching within a certain range. Even if it was discovered accidentally, it might be overlooked. This world seemed to be able to camouflage itself. It was also because Chen Zong came from the Lingwu sacred world that he had a faint connection with the Lingwu sacred world. That was why he could sense it after approaching. Looking at the familiar outline that he had not seen for a long time, Chen Zong finally showed a sincere smile from the depths of his heart. Finally, he found it. His hard work was not in vain. The Lingwu sacred world. I'm back. Without immersing himself in emotions, Chen Zong moved and quickly approached. Then, he arrived at the edge of the void outside the Lingwu sacred world. The next moment, his figure flashed and he officially entered the Lingwu sacred world. As soon as he entered, Chen Zong first felt a repulsive force, but that repulsive force disappeared in an instant. It seemed that the force had sensed Chen Zong's identity, or it could be said that it had sensed the aura that belonged to the Lingwu sacred world on Chen Zong's body. Chen Zong also sensed that the power fluctuation was the power of the Lingwu sacred world. There would be a repulsion towards outsiders. Chen Zong guessed that this repulsion might be caused by the will of the world itself. After all, when he entered the black and white world, he did not encounter any repulsion. Heavenly thunder layer. Heavenly thunder rolled and lightning flashed across the sky, like a sea of lightning surging endlessly. This kind of thunder power was many times weaker than the heavenly thunder layer of the black and white world. It was simply indescribable. However, Chen Zong had a very familiar feeling. In the past, when he was still relatively weak, he had gone back and forth to the heavenly thunder layer many times. At first, it was more difficult, but in the end, the heavenly thunder layer did not affect him at all. As for now, the heavenly thunder layer naturally could not do anything to him. With a complicated feeling like a wanderer returning home, Chen Zong entered the heavenly thunder layer alone. The thunder rolled, but it could not do anything to Chen Zong. Chen Zong could also feel that the power of the heavenly thunder layer had increased by a lot compared to the past, at least by several times. Without the cultivation of the demigod level, it was very difficult to move freely in the heavenly thunder layer. From the high-level half-step great sage level to the demigod level, it was almost a qualitative improvement. Chapter 2098. Chen Zong remembered very clearly that when he left, the Tianyuan sacred domain, or rather, the Lingwu sacred world, was broken and incomplete. Because of this, other than those supreme saints who had not appeared in the world for a long time, the strongest were 9-star half-step supreme saints, and there were not many of them. All of this was because of the restrictions of the rules of heaven and earth. However, when he left, the will of the world was gradually recovering, and the rules of heaven and earth were becoming more and more perfect. It had been many years since he left the Tianyuan sacred domain. It was less than 100 years, but it was more than a few decades. After a few decades, he did not know if the will of the world had completely recovered to its original level, which was equivalent to the level of a secondary world of a low-level planet. If it recovered to its previous level, it would be different from before. After passing through the heavenly thunder layer, Chen Zong quickly passed through the heavenly fire layer, and then the astral wind layer, and saw a blue sky and white cloud. Compared to the black and white world, the Tianyuan sacred domain was undoubtedly countless times worse. After all, the complete Lingwu sacred world was only a secondary world, while the black and white world was the original world, and there were several levels in between, such as a minor world, a medium world, a major world, and a primary world. The gap between each level was very shocking. The qi of heaven and earth. Chen Zong carefully sensed that the qi of heaven and earth had increased a lot compared to when he left. Such an environment was more conducive to cultivation. Chen Zong did not look for Chen Xiu, because Chen Xiu had already left the Tianyuan sacred domain and entered the void. Yes, a few years ago, Chen Xiu, who had slaughtered countless demons in the void battlefield, had finally broken through to the Dao manipulation realm with tyrannical power. As soon as he broke through to the Dao manipulation realm, Chen Xiu left alone and entered the void to find the sword tomb left behind by the Nirvana Sword Master. The Nirvana Sword Master. Before, Chen Zong did not understand the meaning, but now he understood that it was a sword master. If it was before, Chen Zong might have been very shocked, but now, Chen Zong had obtained the memories of the daunting sword master, and had also become the successor of the Will Heavenly Palace, so it was not that shocking. Although Chen Xiu was his clone, in fact, he was an independent entity with his own personality and opportunity. Naturally, he would walk his own path. But the void was too big, and Chen Zong could not sense Chen Xiu's existence. Similarly, Chen Xiu could not sense the existence of Chen Zong. Chen Xiu went off in search of his own lucky chance. As his main body, Chen Zong was genuinely happy. Standing quietly in the void, Chen Zong's thoughts swirled and intertwined. It was here that he had continued to grow stronger. He had defeated many powerful enemies and survived many crises. In the end, he had accidentally left Tianyuan sacred region. Now, decades had passed, and he was finally back. Back, a traveler returned of his home. Before returning, Chen Zong seemed to have thought about a lot of things. However, after returning, he actually felt at a loss for a moment. There was a trace of hesitation. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. First, he would go to the Shura sect to have a look. After all, it was the ancient Shura king's last wish, and he had put in a lot of effort into it. Then, he would visit some of his good friends. Also, there was the tomb of the heavenly god Gong. He had promised to toast the heavenly god Gong with wine. Also, he would fulfill the Heart Sword Saint's last wish, and at the same time, pay a visit to the great saints in the Tianyuan sacred domain. After calming down, Chen Zong found that there were still many things he had to do. Then, he would complete them one by one, and there was no need to prioritize. He released his consciousness and directly swept it out, covering a very vast area. Chen Zong carefully identified and compared with his memories, and finally confirmed where he was. Carefully sensing, he could also sense the existence of the bewildering light realm in the bewildering light sea. With a thought, Chen Zong directly appeared on the bewildering light island. Unexpectedly, there were a few people on the bewildering light island. However, Chen Zong did not pay attention to them, and directly appeared in the highest mystery world, and flew in the direction of the Shura sect. Chen Zong's purpose was to see how the Shura sect was developing, and that was enough. Therefore, he did not appear. The Shura sect was developing very well now, and was the strongest force in the territory of Tai Luo City. The sect leader and the original few elders had greatly improved their cultivation and strength, and all of them had reached the level of a half-step great saint. In short, the Shura sect's development was indeed on the right track in the past few decades. In this way, Chen Zong had truly fulfilled one of his wishes and silently left. The Shura sect now had its own path of development, and there was no need for him to contribute. Back then, he and Chen Xiu had contributed greatly to the invasion of the Purgatory Ghost race, and many people knew that he and Chen Xiu had a close relationship with the Shura sect. Only a few decades had passed, and no matter how forgetful they were, they would not forget. Therefore, no one dared to provoke the Shura sect now. The first goal was accomplished, and the second goal was naturally to find the grave of the heavenly god Gong, or where he was buried after his death, and so on. The best targets to look for were those who had witnessed the battle back then, and Chen Zong still remembered some of those people. The heavenly god Gong has disappeared. After finding out the news, Chen Zong could not help but frown, and he was full of doubts. Back then, his sword of heart refinement was very powerful, and the heavenly god Gong should have died after being split in half by his sword. However, those who wanted to collect the heavenly god Gong's corpse to build a large tomb saw with their own eyes that the heavenly god Gong's corpse turned into a ray of golden light and disappeared. Dozens of years had passed, but he had not appeared, and there was no news of him. Could it be related to the will of the world? Chen Zong could not help but guess. Unfortunately, the will of the world did not have any reaction to his return. Chen Zong also tried to communicate with it, but to no avail, and he did not receive any response. Perhaps the heavenly god Gong is not really dead. Chen Zong could not help but guess. If the heavenly god Gong is not really dead, then where did he go? Will there be a chance to meet him in the future? If they meet again, what will happen? Many thoughts flashed through Chen Zong's mind, but Chen Zong did not pursue the matter, because there was no way to find out. In that case, I will return to the Xianyuan world to take a look. After muttering to himself, Chen Zong moved and disappeared. With the power of the bewildering light realm, he first appeared in the 10,000 cracks sword scar to observe it. In the past, Chen Zong felt that the sword qi in the 10,000 cracks sword scar was very shocking and mysterious, and it was the best place to comprehend the sword Dao. However, looking at it now, it was no longer as powerful, stunning, and majestic as before. With a flash, Chen Zong appeared at the end of the 10,000 cracks sword scar, and an extremely powerful 10,000 cracks sword intent suddenly burst out, turning into a sword ray that cut across the sky. In a trance, Chen Zong seemed to see a middle-aged man in green holding a sharp sword. His eyes were disdainful, and his shocking sword intent was earth-shattering, as if it could tear apart everything. Immediately, that disdainful and sharp gaze seemed to pierce through layers of space and time as it stared at him. From that pair of eyes, Chen Zong felt a kind of determination to press forward, cut through everything, and die 100 times without regret. The sword was out. A wisp of green sword ray instantly tore through the sky, as if it also tore through layers of space and time, and attacked Chen Zong. As the sword ray attacked, the figure of the middle-aged man in green also quickly dissipated, turning into bits of green light that scattered in the void. In an instant, Chen Zong looked solemn, and the extreme heart phaseless sword also appeared in his hand, and he slashed with it. The two swords collided in an instant. Chen Zong seemed to feel an astonishing power that could tear everything apart. It was as if it wanted to tear his sword apart, tear his arm apart, tear his body, and even tear his soul apart. That was the power of the 10,000 cracks sword intent. In the next breath, everything collapsed. It collapsed under Chen Zong's sword. Chen Zong stood still in the void with his sword in hand, and carefully reflected on it. That sword was a sword that cut through space and time. Chen Zong also felt the power of that sword, and felt the level of strength of the 10,000 cracks sword king back then. That strength should be at the level of the second transformation Dao manipulation realm. Of course, because it was too long ago, and it was not the real body, but only a remnant of the will, it was difficult to judge clearly. But it should be about the same. Unfortunately, the 10,000 cracks sword king died in battle because of the invasion of the demon army in the void. Chen Zong's figure flashed, and he left. The next step was to return to the Xianyuan world. Back then, when he left the Xianyuan world, he encountered an assassin, and it was probably related to Chu Wangshi of the Xianyuan dynasty. And that Master Xianyuan, who wanted to deceive and force him to give up the spot of the Lingwu sacred land. If it were not for the help of the immortal profound warrior, he was afraid that he would have lost the opportunity of the Lingwu sacred land. Ever since he started cultivating, any opportunity that he obtained would have a great effect on his growth. If he lacked any one of them, it would affect his growth. Therefore, when he tried to seize the opportunity of the Lingwu sacred land back then, it was equivalent to cutting off his cultivation path. He had to repay this debt. At the same time, he also wanted to see what Master Xianyuan was capable of, and see what level the Supreme Saint experts in the Lingwu sacred world were at now. How was it compared to the Dao manipulation realm in the void? Strength was the foundation. With more strength, Chen Zong's confidence increased a lot. The 80,000-mile sunken bone abyss was terrifying and extremely dangerous to Chen Zong back then, but now Chen Zong crossed it directly. The bone beast appeared and then condensed into a 100-meter-long bone beast. Back then, even Chen Zong did not want to face it head-on. Then, as if it sensed the threat from Chen Zong, it continued to fuse into a 1,000-meter-long bone beast. Its power had reached the level of a half-step Supreme Saint. But to Chen Zong, it was nothing. He could destroy it with a flick of his finger. In an instant, as if something in the sunken bone abyss was angered, a terrifying roar sounded, and in the rolling fog, a huge bone claw suddenly appeared out of thin air and fell directly. This bone claw was surrounded by endless death qi, and its power was so terrifying that it made Chen Zong feel a sense of danger. But it was only a sense of danger. He did not draw his sword, but only pointed a finger, and a wisp of sword qi broke through the air, instantly shooting toward the huge bone claw. Chapter 2099. Author's Note: I'm adding a chapter to the Alliance Leaders, Fairy Under the Moonlight. As though it had been angered by Chen Zong, an extremely frightening roar that seemed to have originated from the death prison sounded. Endless grayish aura swept out from all directions like a storm, majestically covering the sky. Bones. Countless skeletons broke out of the ground and surged toward the bone claw. They were like thousands of streams returning to their origin, completely fusing with the bone claw. The trajectory was mysterious, causing Chen Zong's expression to change slightly. A mysterious feeling appeared in his heart, as if it contained some kind of law between heaven and earth. Vaguely, Chen Zong seemed to have grasped something, as if some inspiration was about to burst out. However, the bone claw, which seemed to be covered with layers of armor, struck down again. This strike had reached the level of the path manipulation realm. It was extremely powerful and shocking. Chen Zong was sure that the bone claw would not have been so powerful decades ago. The reason why it was so powerful now was probably related to the awakening and rapid recovery of the will of the world. Sword light flashed and starlight gathered, covering the sky and suppressing the earth. The secret sword of the great refinement of stars. In an instant, the sword light was like a huge star, exuding unparalleled power and suppressing everything. The supreme power descended. Although the bone claw was powerful, it was not strong enough. Under the suppression, it suddenly trembled and could not move. In the next moment it cracked inch by inch. Wail. Roar. It seemed to have a trace of fear. In the end, it slowly returned to silence. It seemed that the will of the sinking bone abyss was afraid. Since it was afraid, Chern Zong did not intend to continue the chase. In a flash, Chern Zong flew past the sinking bone abyss and into the Xianyuan world's airspace at the fastest speed possible. The moment he entered the mystic origin world, Chern Zong stood motionless. Various thoughts and scenes constantly flashed through his mind. The Xianyuan world should be his second stop after entering the Tianyuan sacred realm. It was also the place where he really rose to prominence in the Tianyuan sacred realm. This place carried many of his memories. Back then, each and every one of his opponents were more outstanding and stronger than him. Now, they had all been overtaken by him. He wondered what level they were at now. Was he a half-step great sage? Demigod rank? Dozens of years ago, there were no other demigods in the Tianyuan sacred realm other than himself, Chern Xiu, and the heavenly god Gong. However, the current Tianyuan sacred realm was very different after the awakening and recovery of the world will. In the highest mystery realm, Chern Zong could sense some demigod rank auras. Chern Zong didn't have the slightest intention of looking for those people because he didn't have much of a friendship with them. With another move, Chern Zong flew toward the royal family of the Xianyuan dynasty. He appeared directly above the royal family, and his powerful divine senses swept out. Find Venerable Master Xianyuan. Decades had passed and the world had changed. Chern Zong didn't know if Master Xianyuan was still alive. He scanned the area with his spiritual perception, but he did not find Venerable Master Xianyuan. Instead, he found Chu Wangshi. His aura had reached the demigod rank. He was a powerhouse of the Xianyuan dynasty and a person of great authority. But, so what? Looking at the person who suddenly appeared in front of him, Chu Wangshi furrowed his brows in anger. The increase in his cultivation didn't improve his temperament. Instead, it magnified the tyrannical nature of his heart. Who are you? Chu Wangshi's eyes flashed with killing intent. We haven't seen each other for dozens of years, don't you recognize me? Chern Zong smiled faintly. When I went to the sunken bone abyss, you were the one who hired assassins to kill me, right? It's you. Chu Wangshi's pupils shrank. Seeing Chu Wangshi's expression, Chern Zong knew that the three assassins from back then were related to Chu Wangshi. Since that was the case, there was no need to talk nonsense. With a single thought, a beam of sword chi shot out from the void without any form of movement. Extremely fast. It was so fast that even the first stage demigod rank Chu Wangshi didn't notice it. Before he could say anything, his forehead was pierced and he died. Chu Wangshi opened his mouth and eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe that he was killed just like that. Then, a tyrannical will exploded, and a figure condensed on his body. Chern Zong recognized it at a glance. It was Venerable Master Xianyuan. As expected, Venerable Master Xianyuan had left something on Chu Wangshi's body. Who are you? How dare you kill this Lord's disciple? Venerable Master Xuanyuan's will stared at Chern Zong with killing intent. I'll wait for you. Chern Zong didn't answer the question. Venerable Master Xuanyuan's will turned cold, and in the next breath, it shattered. At the same time, outside the Xianyuan world, Venerable Master Xianyuan, who was cultivating, opened his eyes. How dare you kill this Lord's disciple? No matter who you are, you won't be able to escape death. Venerable Master Xuanyuan's body turned faint. He was confident. After all, he was a supreme great saint. Moreover, the changes in Tianyuan sacred region were very obvious in the past few decades. The benefits it brought were very shocking, and his cultivation and strength had increased significantly. Not long after, Chern Zong sensed Venerable Master Xuanyuan's aura. In the sky, Chern Zong quietly waited for Venerable Master Xuanyuan's arrival. After the aura, Venerable Master Xuanyuan's tyrannical aura locked onto Chen Zong from afar. Why did you kill my disciple? Venerable Master Xuanyuan felt that the person in front of him looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. However, he didn't think that it was Chen Zong. After all, it had only been a few decades. Under his guidance and the changes in the world, his disciple, the Crown Prince, had only reached the demigod rank. He deserved to die. Chen Zong replied calmly. Do you know that he was my last disciple? Venerable Master Xuanyuan was furious. He was so angry that it seemed as if he wanted to burn Chen Zong to ashes. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Back then, you tried to steal my opportunity. I'll return the favor with a sword. Chen Zong wasn't affected by Venerable Master Xuanyuan's anger at all. He said calmly with a smile. Venerable Master Xuanyuan didn't attack immediately because he couldn't see through Chen Zong. Now that he heard Chen Zong's words, he looked at Chen Zong more carefully. The more he looked, the more confused he became. Chen Zong didn't say anything. Sword light flashed as the extreme heart phaseless sword gathered in his hand. He swung the sword. The sword light broke through the air in an instant. In just an instant, the sword light flashed in front of Venerable Master Xuanyuan. A cold light pierced through the air. The world under the sword light seemed to fall into darkness. All light was swallowed up. This was an extremely terrifying sword. It was a sword that made his heart tremble. The crisis and despair of death surged from the depths of his heart. However, Venerable Master Xuanyuan had cultivated for many years and lived for many years. His heart was extremely tough. He instantly unleashed all his power. Rumble! A feeling of the world being turned upside down surged. Endless chi of heaven and earth gathered from all directions and rushed into his body. In an instant, Venerable Master Xuanyuan seemed to have controlled the chi of heaven and earth. Chen Zong couldn't control it at all. However, it still couldn't affect Chen Zong's sword. This was an ultimate sword. It was a sword that could pierce the moon and shatter the stars. It was as if nothing in the world could block this sword. Piercing, tearing. Venerable Master Xuanyuan realized that all his means, all his strength, and all his defenses couldn't block it. When the darkness retreated, the sword light also disappeared. It was as if it had never appeared. Chen Zong's face was filled with disappointment. Venerable Master Xuanyuan couldn't even block his sword. From his opponent's outburst, Chen Zong had already sensed that Venerable Master Xuanyuan's cultivation was at the first transformation Dao manipulation realm. However, his strength wasn't very high. He was only at the first transformation Dao manipulation realm. For a moment, many thoughts flashed through Chen Zong's mind. Previously, the Tianyuan sacred realm was a broken secondary world. Naturally, it was difficult to reach the demigod realm. Even the supreme saints were affected. Not only was it difficult to improve their cultivation, but they were also restricted. They couldn't easily attack. Even if they attacked, they could only use a small part of their strength. Otherwise, Chen Zong's opportunity would have been taken away. He wouldn't have been able to hold on until Xiantian Divine General appeared. With the awakening of the world will and the restoration of the world, the suppression of the Supreme Saint realm naturally disappeared. He could start to cultivate and improve himself. However, a secondary world was a secondary world. Even if it was restored to a complete secondary world, it was still limited. Decades had passed, and Venerable Master Xuanyuan was still at the first transformation Dao manipulation realm. It would probably take him a long time to break through to the second transformation Dao manipulation realm, unless he dared to risk entering the void to look for opportunities. However, the void was very dangerous. Even a Dao manipulation realm cultivator could be killed. Venerable Master Xuanyuan's entire body trembled. He could only feel a wisp of sword chi swimming around in his body. Everywhere it passed, he felt like he was being dismembered. His strength was scattered and he couldn't gather it. He didn't die, nor was he seriously injured. However, that wisp of sword chi was so strong that Venerable Master Xianyuan couldn't expel it at all. In other words, his strength was temporarily crippled. Not killing him was worse than killing him. The current Venerable Master Xianyuan was only a little better than the ordinary cultivators. That was all. Not killing Venerable Master Xianyuan was punishing him. Chernzong also planned to get some information from Venerable Master Xianyuan. For example, information about other supreme saints and so on. Being afraid of death, Venerable Master Xianyuan naturally cooperated and told him all he knew. This way, Chernzong would have a more direct understanding of the supreme saints in Tianyuan sacred realm. Before the ancient war, there were some supreme saints in Tianyuan sacred realm. They weren't weak. After all, the Lingwu sacred realm was still very intact. However, after the ancient war, the world was broken and gradually declined. Venerable Master Xianyuan had only broken through at that time. However, it wasn't complete. After the breakthrough, he only had the realm but not the power. He hadn't recovered until now. In addition, there were also some so-called Great Sage stage experts who were not complete Great Sage stage experts. Do you know anything about Hongyan Bladesha? Chernzong asked finally. Hongyan Bladesha. Venerable Master Xianyuan was shocked. He immediately shook his head. Hongyan Bladesha was a supreme saint before the ancient war. Before the ancient war, she seemed to have left the Lingwu sacred realm. She hasn't returned yet. There's no news about her. Chapter 2100. Second update, one update at night. Hongyan Bladesha. It was the supreme saint who had killed the Heart Sword Saint back then. He had a deep relationship with the Heart Sword Saint and could be considered a friend of life and death. The Heart Sword Saint's last wish was to question why Hongyan Saber Slaughter suddenly attacked him and killed him back then. But now, the Hongyan Bladesha was not in the Tianyuan sacred domain and was not even in the Lingwu sacred world. Chernzong naturally could not fulfill the Heart Sword Saint's last wish. He could only enter the void and investigate. But the void was vast and there were countless cultivators. It would take a long time to find the Hongyan Bladesha. But since Chernzong had already benefited from the Heart Sword Seal, it meant that he had benefited from the Heart Sword Saint first. Naturally, he had to fulfill the Heart Sword Saint's last wish. That strand of sword chi would not kill Sage Xianyuan, and would not exist forever. It would only last for 1,000 years. Within 1,000 years, Sage Xianyuan would not be able to use his own strength, and would be constantly attacked by the sword chi. He would be in great pain. This was the punishment that Chernzong had given him. After all, his opportunity had not been taken away, and he had not been hurt. 1,000 years of torture was enough. If you want revenge after 1,000 years, come to the void. Chernzong smiled at Sage Xianyuan. But I will not keep my sword then. No, no, no. Sage Xianyuan hurriedly waved his hand. It had only been a few decades and Yi Futian had already surpassed him and become so strong. If another 1,000 years passed, he would not be able to make any progress while Yi Futian could continue to cultivate. Yi Futian's talent was amazing and would only become stronger. By then, he would know better than now that he would be seeking his own death if he wanted revenge. Moreover, he had thought that he would be crippled. He did not expect that there would be a time limit of 1,000 years. Although he would be tortured by the sword chi for 1,000 years, it was better than having no hope. He just had to endure the 1,000 years. Perhaps it would be more difficult than he had imagined, but there was always hope. Chernzong no longer paid any attention to Master Xianyuan. He could tell that Master Xianyuan had no intention of revenge. He did not have the guts to do so. Even if he recovered 100 years later, he might not have the guts to leave the Lingwu holy world and enter the void. After leaving, Chernzong went to the barracks of the Tianxian army to look for Xiantian Divine General. Unfortunately, he was not there. Thus, Chernzong once again stepped into the void battleground of the Xianyuan dynasty. Chernzong was quite familiar with this place. After staying for a while, he found immortal General Xiantian and thanked him for his help back then. Then, he had a discussion with him. Divine General Xiantian's heart was filled with indescribable shock. It had only been a few decades, but the little guy from back then had grown so much. When he learned that Chernzong had defeated Venerable Master Xianyuan with a single strike, the shock in his heart reached its peak. It was as if the world had been turned upside down. Naturally, Divine General Xiantian was curious about Chernzong's experience. Chernzong did not deliberately hide it and told him part of it. Divine General Xiantian was amazed by how vast and wonderful the void was. "It's a pity that I have to stay here. Otherwise, I would enter the void to have a look and have a try." Divine General Xiantian laughed in high spirit. Venerable Master Xianyuan could not compare with his lofty sentiments and wisdom. At the end of the conversation, Divine General Xiantian wanted to see Chernzong's strength. Chernzong certainly did not refuse. However, he did not act recklessly, because Divine General Xiantian was only in the first rotation of the Tao controlling realm. In the end, Chernzong gave Divine General Xiantian the flesh of the void behemoth Black Snake, which was of great benefit to him. After that, Chernzong went to see his former comrades in the same team. Unfortunately, only 2 of them were still alive. He gave them some flesh of the void behemoth Black Snake. After taking it, they could strengthen themselves and increase their strength. It was better than many divine elixirs, and there were no side effects. For a half-step great saint, the flesh of the Black Snake was amazing. The last person Chernzong went to was Killer Master. Killer Master was wearing a mask and was very mysterious. Back then, Killer Master had helped him a lot, but he did not have enough ability to repay him. Now he could. The Killer Master still looked the same as he did back then. However, his cultivation and strength were much stronger than before. Level 1 of the demigod level. Killer Master was very talented. Now that the will of the world had recovered, the rules of heaven and earth and the chi of heaven and earth had been perfected and restored over the past few decades, which was of great benefit to cultivators. The more talented one was, the greater the benefit. It was reasonable that Killer Master could reach the first level of the demigod level after several decades. Back then, Chernzong was also curious about what kind of face Killer Master had under his mask. Now, he was still curious. So, Chernzong opened his mind perception. The mind perception was very mysterious. The face behind Killer Master's mask was completely presented in Chernzong's heart. Without saying anything else, Chernzong exchanged a few words with Killer Master. Then, he took out 2 things and gave them to Killer Master. The first was the flesh of the void behemoth Black Snake. It weighed 5,000 kilograms, which was enough for Killer Master to eat for a long time. It was also enough to strengthen Killer Master's body, improve his cultivation, and enhance his strength. Of course, for a black snake that was thousands of meters long, even if the bones, organs, and skin were removed, the remaining flesh would weigh at least 5,000 kilograms. 5,000 kilograms was nothing. The other was a divine weapon, an external divine weapon. Among the more than 200 divine weapons that Chernzong had obtained, Chernzong had specially left it behind. It was a sharp weapon of good quality, suitable for Killer Master to use. As long as he refined that divine weapon, Killer Master's strength would increase by several times. It was very obvious. The Killer Master had never expected that he would receive such a shocking return after he had only thought highly of Lin Fan back then. To him, there were so many benefits that he could not reject it. In the end, Chernzong gave Killer Master 50,000 kilograms of the void behemoth Black Snake's flesh. After all, he had been in the Divine Xian army in the past. They had fought together and experienced life and death together. Chernzong also hoped that the divine Xian army could become stronger. If the flesh of the void behemoth Black Snake was used well, it was enough to raise the overall strength of the divine Xian army to a whole new level. As for the Tianxian army, it was too big. Even if Chernzong took out all the flesh of the void behemoth Black Snake, it would still not be enough. Chernzong planned to leave a portion to bring back to Blue Wave's world and distribute it to others. Therefore, he did not give it to the Tianxian army. It's time to leave, Chernzong thought. He bid farewell to Killer Master and Xiantian Divine General and left the void battleground. Before returning to Blue Wave's world, Chernzong still had two places to visit. One was Baiyun Mountain. Baiyun Mountain for thousands of years. Baiyun Mountain was located in the four great upper regions, outside of Tianyuan's sacred region. Chernzong realized that the barrier between Tianyuan's sacred region and the four great upper regions seemed to be slowly disappearing. At this rate, the barrier might completely disappear in another 100 years. Baiyun Mountain. Senior Sister Yu. After flying out of the barrier, Chernzong's speed was astonishing. As he muttered to himself, some images flashed through his mind. He could not help but smile. I wonder how Senior Sister Yu is after so many years. Is she well? What cultivation level has she reached? Second Revolution Dao Controlling Realm. Chernzong's speed was extremely fast. Before long he saw a tall mountain surrounded by countless white clouds standing on the ground. Even though the barrier between the Tianyuan sacred realm and the outer realm still existed and had not completely disappeared, the outer realm had also benefited greatly over the past few decades as the will of the world had awakened and recovered. The overall level of cultivation had increased by a level. In the past, there were very few half-step great saints in the four great upper regions. However, there were many half-step great saints now. Chernzong could sense that there were more than a dozen half-step great saint auras on Baiyun Mountain. Among them, 4 auras were very familiar. They were the 4 Daolords. Of course, the 4 Daolords of Baiyun Mountain were much weaker than the real Daolords. After all, the real Daolords were the dominators of the void. In Chernzong's eyes, Baiyun Mountain was infinitely tall. However, it did not seem like much now. This was because Chernzong had already seen many tall mountains that were far taller than Baiyun Mountain. Their auras were incomparably shocking. However, Baiyun Mountain made Chernzong feel a little warm. After restraining his aura, he condensed a white cloud and floated into Baiyun Mountain leisurely. Chernzong went straight to Daolord Huanyun. After seeing Chernzong again for less than 100 years, Daolord Huanyun realized that Chernzong was unfathomable. He could not see through him at all. To Chernzong, the past few decades felt like a very, very long time. This was because he had experienced too much. Countless memories filled his mind. Of course, his feelings were different. From Daolord Huanyun, Chernzong also learned that the changes in the past few decades had affected him greatly. If he waited until the barrier disappeared, the impact would only be greater. Similarly, Chernzong also shared some of his experiences. However, his experiences in the void were too distant. To Daolord Huanyun, Chernzong only shared some of his experiences in the Tianyuan sacred region. What's your cultivation level now? Daolord Huanyun could not help but ask curiously, half-step great sage or stronger? To Daolord Huanyun's knowledge, a half-step great sage was very strong. After all, apart from the Tianyuan sacred region, there were no demigod experts in the outer regions. Stronger, Chernzong said with a smile. Daolord Huanyun could not help but gasp. Then, he laughed heartily. He was very happy. Daolord, where's Senior Sister Yunyanxin? Did she go out to train? Chernzong did not sense Yunyanxin's aura in Baiyun Mountain, so he asked. Yunyanxin. Decades ago, after the great changes in the world, she went out to train and disappeared. Daolord Huanyun could not help but sigh. At that moment, it was as if thunder rumbled in his mind, causing Chen Zong to be momentarily dazed. Images flashed through his mind. The first time they met, when they became fellow disciples of Baiyun Mountain, and when they helped each other during training. He did not expect that when he returned this time, he could not find her. Moreover, there was no news of her. He did not know how she was after decade. Was she dead? Or did something happen? I also used the power of Baiyun Mountain to search for her, but I couldn't find her. Lord Huan Yun could not help but sigh. Yun Yanxin was a very talented disciple. Chapter 2101. Stars filled the sky and gradually disappeared at dawn. The golden rays of the morning sun shone from the eastern horizon and rose slowly. A figure stood at the peak of the mountain. When a ray of golden light shone on his face, his eyes that were in a daze and deep in thought trembled slightly. It was as if he had come back to life and regained his liveliness. One night, Chen Zong stood at the peak of the mountain for an entire night. He was a little confused because he heard that senior sister Yu had disappeared for decades and could not be found. This confusion came so suddenly and so unexpected. That night, Chen Zong recalled all kinds of things in the past. Although his time with Yun Yanxin was short, he did not expect that his memory would be so deep. It turned out that a faint trace had been left in his heart unknowingly. That trace did not disappear with the passage of time. Instead, it settled down and became a dusty memory. Now, it was as if it had been unsealed and was gurgling like water. It originated from the heart-sword principle and the deepest feeling in his heart. Chen Zong judged that Yun Yanxin was still alive, but he did not know where she was. Chen Zong also asked White Cloud Mountain to search further, and even offered a reward. Whoever could find Yun Yanxin's whereabouts would be rewarded with 50 kilograms of divine beast flesh. The so-called divine beast flesh naturally referred to the flesh of the void giant black serpent. To the cultivators of the 4 great upper regions, it was worthy of being called a divine beast. Of course, they would not understand if they were told what a void giant black serpent was, and Chen Zong would not explain in detail. The 2 words divine beast were enough to make them extremely moved. Therefore, when the news spread, the 4 great upper regions all took action. If they still could not find Yun Yanxin, it could only mean that she was no longer in the 4 great upper regions. After Chen Zong met the 4 great path masters of White Cloud Mountain, he also left them with tens of thousands of kilograms of black serpent's flesh. This was enough to raise their cultivation and strength by a lot. It could also raise the overall strength of White Cloud Mountain by more than a level. This was also the last gift that Chen Zong had given to him when he joined Mount Baiyun. His next stop was naturally to return to the Floating Cloud region, one of the 36 lower regions. The Blue Cloud sect was the sect that his soul had descended into the Lingwu sacred world. The sect that he had entered back then was also his starting point. In addition, she was the older sister of this body at that time. First, he looked for his elder sister. Now that several decades had passed, his elder sister was no longer suitable for cultivation. However, with the Blue Cloud sect's secret protection, she was able to pass her days peacefully without any disasters or illnesses. Moreover, she had many children and grandchildren. Chen Qingyao, who looked old but was still healthy, was stunned when she saw Chen Zong. You. Chen Qingyao's eyes seemed to become blurry. Her body, which was still healthy, instantly stood up and couldn't help but tremble. Elder sister. Seeing Chen Qingyao again after several decades, an indescribable feeling spread from the bottom of his heart. You. Are you little brother? Chen Qingyao's voice was trembling and her eyes were blurred. You really are little brother. Several decades? Since Chen Zong left several decades ago, Chen Qingyao had never seen him again. Although she had married a good man and had given birth to a pair of filial children, and after her children got married, they also gave birth to a few cute grandchildren. Her family was happy, and there were no disasters or illnesses. Her life was simple and happy. However, there was always a trace of regret in Chen Qingyao's heart, a deep regret. That was her younger brother, Chen Qingzong. This trace of regret didn't dissipate with the passage of time. On the contrary, it settled down and slowly accumulated. Until now, after several decades, she saw her younger brother again, as if she was in a dream. Chen Qingyao cried and laughed at the same time. Chen Zong's eyes were also wet unconsciously. The siblings naturally needed to have a good talk, especially Chen Qingyao, who had a lot to say. Chen Qingyao spoke, and Chen Zong listened. Time passed slowly. After that, Chen Qingyao also introduced her husband to Chen Zong. She also called her children and grandchildren to visit Chen Zong. After all, Chen Zong was their elder, and they all had to call him uncle. Chen Qingyao's children were surprised to see a person younger than them call him uncle. However, they also knew that their mother did say that she had a younger brother who was a cultivator with amazing talent. He had entered one of those extremely powerful sects years ago. Moreover, they also heard that powerful cultivators could prolong their lives and stay young. This time, Chen Zong didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stayed for about half a month. Naturally, Chen Zong also gave his sister's family some simple benefit. Although they were simple benefits, they were enough to prolong their lives and strengthen their bodies. It was no problem for them to live for hundreds of years without any disasters or illnesses. It was very easy. As for his sister's grandchildren, of course, they also received benefit. If they stepped on the path of cultivation, they could more or less be regarded as geniuses. Chen Zong set off for the Blue Cloud sect, and left some benefits for them. Firstly, he had once cultivated in the Blue Cloud sect. Secondly, he wanted to repay them for secretly protecting his sister all these years. Everything was done. In this world, he had basically done what he needed to do. It's time to return to the Blue Waves world, Chen Zong thought. It was impossible to return to the Blue Waves world with his current strength. However, he had the Heart Sword Seal. He mobilized his power and poured it into the Heart Sword Seal. Suddenly, the Heart Sword Seal trembled slightly and emitted light. Then, following Chen Zong's will, it slashed like a heavenly sword and split open a world passage that led directly to the Blue Waves world. Chen Zong moved and immediately stepped into the passage. In the past, he had always been passive in traveling. This time, however, he was actively traveling. This kind of feeling was very wonderful. Chen Zong couldn't help but be immersed in it. In particular, Chen Zong had mastered the heavenly magical Great Void Evasion technique. He could travel through the void, so his comprehension was even more profound. In an instant, the mysteries of the void became even clearer. The mysteries of the Great Void Escape technique were also further comprehended by Chen Zong. Previously, Chen Zong had only comprehended the heavenly magical Great Void Evasion technique to the entry level. Even if he put it in his heart palace to comprehend and cultivate, the improvement in a short period of time was very limited. But now, Chen Zong had a kind of feeling that the speed of improvement of his Great Void Evasion technique had sped up. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before he could reach the small success level. The gap between the entry level and the small success level should be very big. Not long after, Chen Zong stepped out of the world passage and saw a barrier. That barrier had already been torn apart by the power of the Heart Sword Seal. Chen Zong stepped out, crossed that barrier, and directly entered the Blue Waves world. The moment Chen Zong entered the Blue Waves world, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly emerged. The sky instantly darkened as if there were countless pitch-black lightnings spreading out. Destruction. An earth-shattering aura of great destruction was born in an instant and quickly spread out. For a moment, everyone in the entire world felt a kind of heart palpitating and panic for no reason. It was as if the end of the world was coming. Especially for those with higher cultivation, the more clearly they felt it. It was as if a catastrophe was coming. It was as if everything was going to break. Everything was going to turn into nothingness and completely disappear. Destruction, destruction, destruction. Everything was going to break and return to nothingness. Appearing in the blue waves world, Chen Zong had yet to look around when he felt the drastic changes in the world. With a slightly solemn expression, Chen Zong hurriedly restrained his aura. He even sealed it very thoroughly. In just an instant, the world that had undergone drastic changes as if the end of the world was coming also slightly paused. Gradually, that extremely terrifying aura of destruction also faded, and the dark clouds in the sky also gradually dispersed. That feeling of a catastrophe also dissipated along with it. As expected, Chen Zong couldn't help but secretly say, the Blue Waves world was inferior to the Lingwu Holy World. In terms of level, it was far from reaching the subworld level of the world in the void. It could only be regarded as a half-subworld level. Such a world naturally couldn't withstand the arrival of a powerhouse of the path-controlling realm. Fortunately, Chen Zong was very special. He could seal all his power and all his aura so that it wouldn't leak out in the slightest. Otherwise, this Blue Waves world would be heading towards destruction. Chen Zong wasn't here to cause destruction. Naturally, he couldn't let the Blue Waves world be destroyed. Now that so many years had passed, he didn't know how his old friend was doing. With a thought, Chen Zong immediately took a step forward. In an instant, layers of ripples spread out in the void. Chen Zong's body directly disappeared into the ripples. When he appeared, he was already 10,000 meters away. Crossing 10,000 meters in one step was nothing for Chen Zong at full speed. It was insignificant. However, the Blue Waves world was ultimately not strong enough. In this place, if Chen Zong were to fly, he simply couldn't display the speed of 10,000 meters in an instant. It wasn't that he couldn't, but that he couldn't because it would cause great damage to this world. Fortunately, the Great Void Evasion technique could be used here. Of course, he couldn't erupt with his full strength. He could only use a small part of his power. The consumption was very low, and it wouldn't damage this world. One step was 10,000 meters. 100,000 meters was 10 step. As Chen Zong walked 10,000 meters in one step, he turned his head and pondered. Taiyuan Heaven Sect. Unhindered Sword Sect. These were all sects that he had once joined. He should go take a look and leave some benefits for them. Of course, the benefits couldn't be too excessive. If it was too excessive, it wouldn't be a blessing but a disaster. He would first go to the Taiyuan Heaven Sect. As for the Earth Demon Abyss, Chen Zong didn't pay attention to it. In the past, he had already done his best. Now, the matters of this world should be handled by the people of this world. Moreover, in less than 100 years, the vitality of the Earth Demon clan had been greatly damaged. It wouldn't be so easy to recover. After leaving some benefits, Chen Zong quickly left and went straight to the Unhindered Sword Sect. Similarly, after leaving some benefits for the Unhindered Sword Sect, Chen Zong's footsteps didn't stop. Next, it was time for his first master, the Marquis of Linshan. However, when he left, the Marquis of Linshan was already greatly valued by the dynasty. Presumably, his position was even higher now. As his first master, Chen Zong had enough respect for the Marquis of Linshan. Returning this time, he had to pay a visit. Chapter 2102. Some of my friends said that they were a little dizzy after reading yesterday's update because they had forgotten the previous plot. They said that they wanted to read it again from the beginning. Their spirit is commendable. Some of them said that they remembered the notes of the 6 paths very well. In fact, the 6 paths had forgotten it too. They had to flip through it to find out. Marquis Linshan was now Lord Linshan. He had a high position and was above everyone else. When he saw Chen Zong again, Lord Linshan was first in a trance, then he sighed with emotion. Senior sister Guan Yunxi was not young, but because of her cultivation, she did not look old. However, time had left traces on her face. Compared with her playful appearance in the past, Guan Yunxi was more mature and charming. Seeing Chen Zong again, and such a young Chen Zong, it was as if time had not left any traces on him. Guan Yunxi was indescribably envious, but that was all. She could not help but feel a little excited. Decades had passed, but Guan Yunxi was still unmarried. This was also a headache for Lord Linshan. After staying for a day, Chen Zong left some resources for Lord Linshan's master and senior sister Guan Yunxi that would be helpful for their cultivation, and so on. Then, he left impatiently. Because the eastern continent was in sight. Chen Zong had changed his body, and the bloodline of this body was no longer related to the eastern continent. In fact, it was not even related to the Blue Waves world. However, the brand that originated from the depths of his soul made Chen Zong fit in with this world. The brand in the depths of his soul surpassed his bloodline. The eastern continent, father, and sister, senior sister, those were the things that he cared about in the depths of his heart. After bidding farewell to his master and senior sister, Chen Zong immediately left. The desire and urgency in his heart made Chen Zong directly perform the Great Void Evasion technique. He traveled 10,000 meters in one step. I wonder what level this junior brother of yours has reached. Looking at Chen Zong's disappearing figure, Lord Linshan let out a long sigh. He felt a little melancholy, but also a little proud. Guan Yunxi did not answer. Looking at Chen Zong's disappearing figure, she felt lost. Her eyes also unconsciously dimmed. Lord Linshan understood his daughter's thoughts, but unfortunately, they were not fated to be together. Moreover, they couldn't keep up. It was a familiar mountain. Chen Zong remembered that the first time he had crossed this mountain, he had been attacked by danger, and had had no choice but to risk his life. He had only barely made it through and stepped into a new world. Now that he thought about it, it felt as if it was just yesterday, but also as if it was a lifetime ago. Chen Zong couldn't help but smile. The memories of his youth were like a drop of sweet dew when he recalled them now. There was a feeling of endless aftertaste. Only old people like to reminisce about the past. Am I old? Chen Zong couldn't help but touch his face. He was still young, handsome, and extraordinary. Of course, Chen Zong looked young, but for ordinary people, he was indeed very old. After all, he had lived for at least 100 years. Homesick, Chen Zong's heart was a little uneasy, and even a little scared. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see his father. Only he took a deep breath. That breath rolled up an astonishing and mighty storm. When he calmed down, Chen Zong stepped out again. The Eastern Land. Chen Zong's return that year established the stability of the Eastern Land and allowed the Chen family to gradually develop. He wondered if the Chen family was even more prosperous now. In fact, Chen Zong didn't care whether the Chen family was more prosperous or not. He only cared about the few people in his heart. The Chen family mansion had been expanded several times. Now it was many times more spacious. Today, the Chen family mansion was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Red lanterns were hung high, and the atmosphere was very festive. Guests came in an endless stream, and they all came with betrothal gift. The sect leader of the true martial sect and the 10 great elders sent 10 boxes of jewelry, 10 manuals, pills. Wow, it's the sect leader of the true martial sect and the 10 great elders. Of course, it's the Chen family, the #1 family in the Eastern Land. There were many people who came to congratulate the Chen family, but there were also many people who came to watch the fun. Because the Chen family would hold a banquet for 3 days and 3 nights, anyone could come and drink to their heart's content. As for the troublemakers, there was no one because the Chen family was now the #1 family in the Eastern Land. In the beginning, there weren't many people, but as time passed, the number of people kept increasing. Now, there were more than a dozen true martial realm experts and dozens of training realm experts. In addition, the Chun family and the true martial sect had a very good relationship, and the true martial sect was the number one sect in the Eastern Land. The alliance of the number one family and the number one sect had completely suppressed the Eastern Land. Even if there were some rascals, they didn't dare to have any ideas about the Chun family and the true martial sect. Especially now, on a joyous day, who would dare to cause trouble? It was purely because they were tired of living. Needless to say, the Chun family had the famous Rakshasa sword Chun Chuyun and the Chun family's supreme elder Chun Jingtang. It was said that they were super experts who had surpassed the true martial realm. At this moment, a young man in a white robe was walking slowly. Looking at the Chun family mansion, which was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, he revealed a smile. Chen Zong's divine sense swept across and found a few familiar auras. In the next moment, the figure disappeared like a phantom. Hey, where did he go? The person next to him rubbed his eyes hard and looked again. There was clearly a person in front of him just now. How did he suddenly disappear? Who is it? The companion next to him also stared and said, "You must be seeing things." No, there was clearly a white-robed man just now. Chen Zong seemed to have entered a no-man's land. People came and went, bustling, but no one could discover him. In the deepest part of the Chun family mansion, there was a small courtyard that was equivalent to the Chun family's forbidden area. It was as if it existed independently of the Chun family mansion. Over the years, the Chun family had undergone several renovations and expansions, but they were all outward expansion. That small courtyard was still the same as it was more than 100 years ago because it bore the weight of longing. In the courtyard, there were 3 people surrounding it. Due to the passage of time and frequent wiping, it had become incomparably smooth. Of the 3 people, one was an old man with white hair, but his complexion was ruddy. His eyes were bright and peaceful, and he seemed to be full of energy. The other was an old woman with a cloud bun. Her complexion was also ruddy, and her skin was like a baby's. Not only were her eyes bright, but they also contained traces of sharpness. The third was also an old woman. She looked even older than the second, as if she was even older. However, if you heard them speak, you would be very surprised. "Father, Aunt Yun, have some tea," the old woman said to the old man and the old woman with a cloud bun after pouring tea. Her tone was respectful. "Lan you drink too," the old man said with a smile, his face full of kindness. "Chun Jingtang, Chun Chuyun, Chun Lan." Today was the joyous day of the Chun family's current patriarch's son, and also the joyous day of the 3 juniors. However, the 3 of them did not go out because that junior was several generations away from them. Let the juniors of the Chun family have fun. As the oldest and most senior members of the Chun family, the 3 of them were unwilling to join in, but they also felt happy in their hearts. Because generation after generation, Chen Zong not only continued to pass down the legacy, but also became stronger. Even if there came a day when their lifespan was up and they had to leave, the Chun family would have enough power to protect themselves and protect the Chun family's descendants to live and work in peace. "Father, Sister Yun, Lan." A call suddenly sounded and entered the ears of the 3 people. That voice was somewhat familiar, as if it had penetrated the distant space and awakened the deepest memories in their hearts. Chen Jingtang could not help but tremble. The teacup in his hand shook and the tea spilled. The scalding tea fell on the back of his hand, but he did not notice it at all. "Did you hear that?" Chen Jingtang looked at Chen Chuyun and Chen Lan. "Did you hear that?" He thought that it was an auditory hallucination. Chen Chuyun was also very excited, but Chen Lan was puzzled. "Is it an auditory hallucination caused by the longing in my heart?" Chen Chuyun thought to himself. Immediately, he was stunned because a white-robed figure appeared in front of the table. His eyes were like stars, and he was extraordinarily handsome. That young face seemed to be filled with a layer of divine light, and his temperament was unique. And that face gave them a very familiar feeling. For a moment their eyes were in a trance, as if they had seen through hundreds of years and seen the appearance of the past again. You are Zhong. Chen Jingtang trembled all over, and tears flowed down his old face. Chen Lan also widened her eyes in shock. Chen Zong. His own brother, Chen Zong. It had to be said that Chen Zong's sudden return had an indescribable impact on Chen Jingtang, Chen Chuyun, and Chen Lan. After the excitement, they slowly calmed down, but the joy in their hearts was still surging. Chen Zong was the same. His emotions were surging, and it was difficult to calm down. That was the joy and emotion that came from the deepest part of his heart. Because his aunt did not have any talent for cultivation, she passed away a few decades ago. On the other hand, elder sister Chen Chuyun's talent was considered quite good in the eastern continent, and with a large amount of resources and guidance from Chen Zong, she had successfully broken through to the true martial realm more than 10 years ago and stepped into the first layer of the transcendent realm, the extreme mortal stage. As for his father, Chen Jingtang, he also successfully broke through a few years ago and entered the extreme mortal realm. For the eastern continent, the extreme mortal realm was an invincible existence. His younger sister, Chen Lan, was slightly weaker. She was still in the true martial realm, the peak of the 9th layer of the true martial realm. However, it was not easy for her to break through to the extreme mortal realm, so she looked older. If she could not break through, she probably did not have many years left to live. But now that Chen Zong had returned, he naturally would not let them die so early. Before returning, Chen Zong decided to stay at home for a while. The cultivation of the 33 heavens of will had nothing to do with the yuan qi of heaven and earth, and had nothing to do with the laws of heaven and earth. It was closely related to one's mind. Therefore, there was no difference between cultivating in the eastern continent and cultivating in the Lingwu holy world. Chen Zong stayed at home, but he did not pay attention to the other members of the Chen family. After all, they had nothing to do with him. As for the true martial sect, Chen Zong did not care about them at all. First, he helped his father, elder sister, and younger sister recuperate their vitality. Chen Zong had a lot of spoils of war, some of which were useless to those above the half-step Great Saint realm, but were very useful to those in the transcendent realm. It was not difficult to extend one's lifespan and regain one's youth. As a result, Chen Jingtang returned to his 40s, and Chen Chuyun returned to her 30s. Both of their cultivations had also improved significantly. As for Chen Lan, her cultivation had broken through to the extreme mortal realm, and she returned to her 30s. Now, with their cultivations and the lifespan that they had consumed, they could live up to 1,000 years. Father, elder sister, Xiao Lan, today I will take you to travel the world, Chen Zong said with a smile. It could be said that he had fulfilled a wish that he had in the past. Chapter 2103. Stepping on mountains and rivers, crossing rivers, the vast world was under their feet, and the beautiful mountains and rivers were in their eyes. After spending more than half a year, Chen Zong took his father Chen Jingtang, clan elder sister Chen Chuyun, and little sister Chen Lan to practically travel all over the Blue Waves world. They experienced the local customs and saw the world. Unknowingly, it was also a kind of cultivation. After half a year, they often ate the flesh of the giant snake to nourish their bodies. Although the three of them did not deliberately cultivate their bodies, their physiques became several times stronger. Their cultivation also improved further, and their lifespan also continued to increase unknowingly. Chen Zong hoped that they could live longer and better. Therefore, other than increasing their lifespan, he would also give them some pointers that pointed directly to their essence. This allowed them to use their strength in an even more meticulous manner, allowing them to obtain an extremely significant increase in their strength. After half a year, Chunzong took the three of them back to the eastern land. For a moment, the three of them were silent. They felt that the time to say goodbye had come. Father, Sister Yun, little Lan, cultivate well. Maybe we will meet again one day. Chunzong was very reluctant to part with them, but he also knew that it was time to say goodbye. Half a year was enough for him to take his family to travel the world. Now, the three of them had lived for more than 1,000 years, but 1,000 years was only equivalent to 100 years in the void. After reaching the spirit realm, 100 years in the void was actually nothing. The next time he came back, he did not know how many years it would be. If the three of them continued to cultivate, they could break through and continue to increase their lifespan. Maybe they would have a chance to meet again. You have to be careful this time, Chun Jingtang reminded him. Chunzong was brought up by Chun Jingtang since he was a child. He was both a father and a mother. Naturally, he would be very worried. Father, don't worry, Chunzong said with a smile. Then, he knelt down and kowtowed to Chun Jingtang. He stood up, turned around, and disappeared into the void. Looking at the place where Chunzong disappeared, the three of them were speechless for a long time. Perhaps after this trip, they would never have the chance to meet again. Chunzong rubbed his red eyes. The reluctance in his heart gradually disappeared, and he slowly regained his composure. Now that this matter was over, it was time to leave. All of a sudden, Chunzong looked up at the sky. His pupils constricted as if he could see through the void. With a slight movement of his body, he soared into the sky. Chunzong could feel that the Blue Waves world seemed to be facing a crisis of extinction. Although her wish had been fulfilled, and the crisis of Blue Waves world should be resisted by them, her father and the others were still alive. They were still here, and the crisis of extinction was very likely to affect them. Since he hadn't left yet, he might as well do his last bit. Soon, Chunzong rushed out of the Blue Waves world and entered the void. This was because the feeling of crisis came from the void. Looking into the distance, Chunzong indeed saw a black shadow approaching at an astonishing speed. The demonic fortress. That black shadow was a fortress of the demonic void. It was only one fortress, but the demonic void was evil and powerful. Even if it was only one fortress, once it invaded the Blue Waves world, the people of the Blue Waves world would be in a terrible situation and completely exterminated. According to her perception, there was no God realm demonic void inside the demonic fortress. In other words, there was only a spirit realm demonic void. It was easy to deal with. Using her fingers as a sword, she slashed the void. Slash. In a split second, the sword light flashed and disappeared into the void, as if it had disappeared. Tens of thousands of meters away, the approaching demonic fortress slightly trembled. In the next moment, it was cut open from the middle. Countless sword chi burst out from the demonic fortress, directly piercing, tearing, and shattering the demonic fortress. All the demonic void were killed in an instant. Chunzong observed for a while, but didn't find any other demonic fortresses. Perhaps this was just an accident. As for those demonic void that he had seen in the Earth Demon Abyss, they weren't very strong. Returning to the Blue Waves world, Chunzong once again activated the power of the Heart Sword Seal, opened the world passage, and stepped out, disappearing. As for whether this Blue Waves world would encounter other dangers, Chunzong didn't care. The world was like people. It had its own ups and downs. External forces could interfere, but it wasn't a good thing if they interfered too much. Crossing again, the mystery of the Great Void Evasion technique became more profound. When Chunzong returned to the Lingwu Holy World, he immediately felt that the Great Void Evasion technique had broken through and reached the small success stage. The cultivation of heavenly magical powers was very difficult for the path-controlling realm. It was relatively easy to get started, But it was more difficult to reach the small success stage. As for the large success stage, it was almost hopeless. The stronger and higher the magical power, the more it needed to be carried by oneself. This time, reaching the small success stage of the Great Void Evasion technique was an unexpected surprise. In addition, after returning to the Blue Waves world and seeing his loved ones, Chernzong's fourth Heart Palace was also forged to the large success stage. Moreover, the fifth Heart Palace was also initially forged. The further he went, the harder it was to forge the Heart Palace. Another point was that because he had brought his loved ones to travel the world, the great Tao of the world had been unknowingly perfected. As a result, his body refinement had also broken through and reached the level equivalent to the second transition of the path-controlling realm. Of course, the ascending realm was a general term. The ascending realm of Qi refinement had its own division, and the ascending realm of body refinement also had its own division. Because the cultivation system was different, the names were also different. The ascending realm of body refinement was equivalent to the path-controlling realm, and the corresponding realm was the divine body. In other words, Chernzong's current cultivation was at the second transition of the path-controlling realm and the second transformation of the divine body realm. In other words, this time, he had used some time to fulfill his wish. It wasn't a waste of time, but an unexpected gain. This was also an unexpected surprise. After returning to the Lingwu Holy World, Chernzong immediately made a trip to White Cloud Mountain. There was still no news of Yunyanxin. Perhaps he has already entered the void. Based on an indescribable deep level of perception in his heart, if that was the case, perhaps he would meet him in the void at some point. However, the void was vast and boundless, and it was hard to say. After bidding farewell to White Cloud Mountain, Chernzong returned to the Tianyuan sacred domain. This time, he didn't directly step into the void, but instead entered the void battleground of the Xianyuan dynasty. Chernzong wanted to give it a try. Previously, he had gone back and forth several times, but he had never seen the demons of the void. It was as if the void battleground didn't exist, but perhaps it was on the other side. Now that all his wishes had been fulfilled, he could enter the void and pursue the great Tao wholeheartedly. In this way, he would start from the void battleground. Back then, Chen Xiu had also directly killed his way out of the void battleground. The void battleground of the highest profundity realm had actually been broken through by Chen Xiu. As a result, countless demons of the void had been killed and injured, and the strength of their invasion had decreased a lot, to less than 10% of their usual strength. This had greatly relieved the pressure on the highest profundity realm. In fact, Chernzong also had a slight intention of competing with Chen Xiu across the void, breaking through the void battleground and slaughtering countless demons. The battle between the original body and the doppelganger had already begun the moment the doppelganger appeared. Through the void passage, Chernzong once again stepped into the void battleground of the Xianyuan world. At this very moment, the fiendish demon army of the void was launching a massive attack. The Xiantian army was naturally going all out. After obtaining the giant snake's flesh, the Xiantian army was naturally stronger. It was an extremely fierce battle. In this battle, even a god-level void demon was sent out, and it was fighting fiercely with the Xiantian divine general. In the void, the battle was extremely fierce. When Chernzong arrived, he was not in a hurry to take action, but first observe. Based on the current situation, the Xiantian army was not at a disadvantage. Of course, there were casualties on both sides of the void demon army. But not long after, there was a sudden change. Another void demon army attacked, and immediately put the Xiantian army in danger. After obtaining the external divine weapon and refining it, as well as the void demon black snake's flesh, the killer master's cultivation and strength had more than doubled. He had killed many demons, but now he was surrounded. In an instant, A sword chi pierced through the air and circled around, directly killing all the void demons around him. Chunzong stepped into the battlefield. He did not draw his sword, but countless sword chi continuously shot out. Each streak of sword chi would kill hundreds of void demons as easily as chopping vegetables and melons. The void demons that had just gained the upper hand had lost tens of thousands of their lives in just a few breaths. Massacre. It was a one-sided massacre. Unless it was a god-level void demon, no one could resist Chunzong's sword chi. Kill, 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 kill all of them. Chunzong's attack directly resolved the crisis of the Xiantian army. For a moment, the soldiers of the Xiantian army were stunned. How powerful was this person? He had killed so many void demons by himself. It was terrifying to the extreme. To Chunzong, it was a very carefree feeling. He did not need to hold back and could kill to his heart's content. He also used it to cultivate the legacy sword technique of the Massacre Dao College of the East Court Sword Mountain. It was a sword technique that focused on killing. It was a sword technique that condensed murderous intent. The stronger the murderous intent, the easier it was to cultivate the sword technique, and its power would also be more tyrannical and terrifying. This time around, there were hundreds of thousands of demons in the void. However, under Chunzong's sword chi, they were like a hot knife through butter, unable to resist at all. Kill, kill, kill. 100,000. 200,000. Chunzong's murderous intent accumulated more and more, but soon, it seemed to have disappeared. Chunzong kept condensing it. 300,000. The soldiers of the Xiantian army were all reduced to spectators. They only felt that the battlefield was filled with endless sword chi, and each sword chi was extremely terrifying. The Xiantian Divine General and the God-level Void Demon, who were fighting fiercely in the sky, also noticed it. The Xiantian Divine General was overjoyed, but the God-level Void Demon was furious. However, it could not get rid of the Xiantian Divine General. It didn't take long for Chunzong to slaughter hundreds of thousands of nefarious void devils. Even the nefarious void devil fortresses were completely destroyed. Chunzong looked up and fixed his gaze on the god-level void demon that was fighting with the Xiantian Divine General. He moved and took a step forward. In an instant, he appeared behind the void demon. Chapter 2104. A bit of sword chi pierced through the air like a cold glint. The moment the god-level evil void demon sensed it, it was immediately pierced between its eyebrows. The terrifying sword chi instantly invaded its body and wreaked havoc. Even though the god-level evil void demon's physique was extremely strong and its vitality was incomparably tenacious, it was of no use. The Xiantian Divine General was very shocked. This god-level evil void demon was very tyrannical. He could barely contend with it, and this was under the condition that his strength had increased after consuming the black snake's flesh. However, Chunzong killed it with just a finger and a sword chi. This god-level evil void demon was indeed very strong to the Xiantian Divine General, but it was nothing to Chunzong. It was only at the first revolution of the Dao manipulation realm. He could have killed it before, let alone now that his cultivation had reached the second revolution of the Dao manipulation realm. If this evil void demon had the strength of a sixth revolution of the Dao manipulation realm, it might have been able to fight him. Killing this deity realm void devil was a piece of cake for him. After saying that to the Xiantian Divine General, Chunzong stepped into the void and quickly left. Chunzong intended to try the minor success stage of the Great Void escape technique. He took a step and when he reappeared, he was 200,000 meters away. He had used up a lot of his strength, almost 60%. Chunzong couldn't help but be shocked. Sure enough, heavenly mystiques couldn't be used casually. The consumption was too terrifying, especially when the heavenly mystique was at a higher level. Although it was stronger, the consumption was more astonishing. Only the Yuanming realm could freely bear the consumption of heavenly mystique. Chen Zong took out the evanescent, placed it in his heart core, opened the star map, and did a little search. This place was still within the Yuan star system. It was set as the second city of world suppression. The evanescent began to fly. As for Chen Zong, he first recovered the power he had used up and then cultivated. Now that his wish had been fulfilled, all that was left was to pursue the great Tao. This way, there was no need to be as urgent as before. He didn't have to chase after time and hurry on his way. To him, cultivation was the most important thing right now. He had to improve himself. Therefore, there was no difference whether he was in a hurry or not because he could cultivate properly. In fact, to a certain extent, not being in a rush would allow one's state of mind to be calmer and more relaxed, which was more beneficial to one's cultivation. In the fourth heart palace, Chen Zong placed the divine ability Great Refining Void God Eyes. He felt that this heavenly sacred art would be of great help to him. As for now, Chen Zong was practicing the first level of the Heart Sutra. The cultivation of the Heart Sutra was also quite interesting. One could enter the corresponding state of the Heart Sutra and use it to comprehend and cultivate other martial arts. In this way, while comprehending and cultivating other martial arts, one could also refine the Heart Sutra. What Chen Zong was learning now was one of the inherited sword techniques of the Eastern Court Sword Mountain's Slaughter Dao Academy, the Great Slaughter Blood Prison Secret Sword. This was a divine ability sword technique on the same level as the Great Refining Starry Sky Secret Sword technique. This time, after killing hundreds of thousands of void demons, Chen Zong had accumulated a huge amount of murderous aura. He could use it to cultivate properly. With the memories and experience of the Eastern Court Sword Master, superb comprehension, and a huge amount of murderous aura, Chen Zong also found that under the Heart Sutra state, his comprehension and cultivation efficiency increased by about 10%. A 10% increase was undoubtedly very shocking. It was a huge improvement. The escapee flew towards the target on its own. Chen Zong cultivated wholeheartedly. During this time, he did not encounter any danger. The escapee was also constantly approaching the second world suppression city. In the escapee, the murderous aura around Chen Zong constantly surged and turned into traces of blood red. It was like a blood-red hell, as if it could slaughter all living things. It was extremely frightening and terrifying. It was as if there were countless mournful cries, like the roars of evil spirits. It was soul-stirring and extremely frightening. In the next moment, the blood-red color instantly converged. The great slaughtering blood prison had finally been cultivated to the second level of entry, which was the entry level of heaven's superpower. Now I have accumulated enough. It is time to continue to create my own sword technique, Chen Zong thought to himself. A sword technique obtained from others was still someone else's sword technique. Only a sword technique created by oneself was the most suitable for oneself. Moreover, because of the special nature of the life-divine weapon, the extreme heart phaseless sword, it was closely related to Chen Zong's life. The sword technique that Chen Zong wanted to create would be able to fully unleash the power of himself and the extreme heart phaseless sword. 10,000 swords in one. That was what he had used before, but Chen Zong was very clear that it was just a rough application. Even if he constantly collided and improved under the divine tribulation, it still did not reach a level that he was satisfied with. The real 10,000 swords in one should be able to completely control it. At this moment, he had not reached that level yet. Once again entering the single-minded state, Chen Zong began to comprehend. With a solid foundation and a huge accumulation of swordsmanship, countless mysteries kept flashing in his mind. It was as if there were figures performing all kinds of exquisite swordsmanship. In Chen Zong's vision, 10,000 swords in one should be a sword technique that integrated the essence of all sword techniques into one. It should be a sword technique that integrated countless mysteries of sword principle. Of course, it was very difficult to reach that level. It was indescribably difficult. However, there must always be a starting point, like a foundation, to build a skyscraper. 10,000 swords in one. From this name, one could see Chen Zong's ambition and the superb idea that Chen Zong had for this sword technique. The first move, was often the beginning of a sword technique. It belonged to the foundation and was very important because it was related to the mysteries of the subsequent move. Chen Zong was very cautious. He repeatedly thought about it. When his mind was exhausted, he recovered his mind. When his mind recovered, he entered the single-minded state again and continued to comprehend. Over and over again, little by little, the first level of the single-minded Heart Sutra was constantly improved. At this speed, it would not take long for him to reach the small success. The escapee was very fast, flying at the speed of a high-grade void flying boat. Gradually, the outline of the second world suppressing city appeared in front of him. The first move of 10,000 swords in one also gradually took shape. The first move was the foundation. It was very important, but it was also a move that was relatively easy to create. Chen Zong did not specially think of a name for this move. He directly called it 10,000 swords in one. As for the whole sword technique, he named it 10,000 swords in one technique. Chen Zong felt that creating this move was not the limit. He could continue to improve it. They arrived at the second world suppressing city. Without much emotion, Chen Zong put away the escapee and flew into the second world suppressing city, heading directly to the city master's mansion. There were two strong auras in the city master's mansion. They were the auras of two spirit realm experts. The two auras were quite familiar. One was the city master of the second world suppressing city, Su Luan, the disciple of the unitary sect. The other aura was the old man who followed Su Luan. Both of them were in the path controlling realm. Chen Zong also emitted a trace of aura, pouring into the city master's mansion. It immediately surprised Su Luan and the old man. There were usually spirit realm experts in the second world suppressing city, but they were relatively few. The most important thing was that this trace of aura was familiar to Su Luan. A figure suddenly flashed in his mind. A name jumped out, but he could not believe it. When Su Luan saw Chen Zong, he was extremely shocked. Path controlling realm. Chen Zong was already in the path controlling realm. It was incredible. It had only been a few years since Chen Zong entered the Dongting Sword Mountain. But thinking about it, it was understandable. After all, the Dongting Sword Mountain was very powerful. It was many times stronger than the unitary sect. It was simply an incomparable giant. Chen Zong was also very talented. It was normal for him to break through to the spirit realm after cultivating in the Dongting Sword Mountain. However, there was a rumor not long ago that the Dongting Sword Mountain had fallen apart. Congratulations! You have finally broken through to the spirit realm. You are qualified to be listed among the experts in the void. Su Luan thought and quickly smiled. It's all thanks to Brother Su. Chen Zong smiled and said. Su Luan's aura was restrained, but Chen Zong could still feel that Su Luan's cultivation was the same as his. They were both in the second turn of the path controlling realm. But that divine feeling told him that Su Luan was not his opponent. If he fought with his full strength, one sword was enough to defeat or even kill Su Luan. That was the gap. Haha, I am very curious about the Dongting Sword Mountain. I wonder if you can clear my doubts. Su Luan smiled and welcomed Chen Zong into the city master's mansion. Seeing Chen Zong and feeling Chen Zong's aura, the old man was shocked. How long had it been? At that time, Chen Zong had just entered the first level of the devil prison. At that time, he was still in the first level of the demigod realm. Now, he was already in the path controlling realm. Chen Zong could also see that the old man's cultivation was higher than Su Luan's. He was in the third turn of the path-controlling realm. However, his strength might not be stronger than Su Luan. After all, Su Luan's talent was not bad. He was stronger than the old man. Su Luan was curious about the Dongting Sword Mountain. Chen Zong also told him part of it, but not too much. He only told him the basic structure and so on, which made Su Luan amazed. In the Yuan sect, the younger generation of the spirit realm was the godson, surpassing the true disciple. But in a powerful force like the Dongting Sword Mountain, the younger generation of the spirit realm was still the true disciple. This was also the gap between strength and foundation. I heard that something happened to the Dongting Sword Mountain and it fell apart. I was worried about you. It seems that the news was false. Su Luan suddenly sighed. I don't know who spread the news. Who dares to frame the Dongting Sword Mountain like this? Aren't they afraid of the Sword Mountain's anger? Chen Zong's expression didn't change, but he was secretly shocked. He didn't expect the Dongting Sword Mountain to be in turmoil so soon after the death of the Dongting Sword Master. A force like the Dongting Sword Mountain was originally supported by the Dongting Sword Master alone. Although the headmasters of the 4 major Dao colleges were also very powerful, in the end, they did not sincerely submit to him. In the memories of the Dongting Sword Master, the 4 of them had been subdued. Now that the Dongting Sword Master had died, they all felt it and naturally wouldn't continue to stay in the Dongting Sword Mountain. Once the headmasters of the 4 major Dao colleges left and the enemy knew the truth of the Dongting Sword Master's death, the Dongting Sword Mountain couldn't withstand it. It was natural for it to fall apart. Chapter 2105. Repaying kindness with kindness, repaying resentment with resentment, it was a joyful thing. The escapee quickly left the second world suppressing city and flew towards a mid-level star. Chen Zong was in the escapee, and Su Luan was also accompanying him. Su Luan was very surprised. He did not expect that Chen Zong actually had a high-level void flying boat. As expected, it looked much better than his mid-level void flying boat. Envy. Su Luan's heart was indeed filled with unspeakable envy. Previously, Chen Zong still needed to look up to him. Now, Chen Zong seemed to have the momentum to make him look up to him. But fortunately, Su Luan's mentality was good. He had long expected that sooner or later, Chen Zong would rise and surpass him. Therefore, he quickly adjusted and did not feel unfair or jealous. The speed of a high-level void flying boat is really fast. Su Luan sighed secretly. He was able to buy a mid-level void flying boat not only because of his wealth. Under the amazing speed of the escapee, the Mountain River Star was approaching. The Mountain River Star was a mid-level star, the main star of the Chu family, a high-level star rank force. That year, Chu Shanha had targeted him many times. He had even used the Spring Rain House to hire assassins to cripple him. After that, a spirit realm warrior from the Chu family had failed to recruit him. Instead, he had tried to kill him. Luckily, Su Luan had found him in time. Although he was fine, the grudge between him and the Chu family did exist. At that time, he was not strong enough to seek justice for himself. But now he could. From Su Luan, Chen Zong learned that the strongest expert of the Chu family was the Grand Elder of the Chu family, who was a 7th transformation Dao controlling realm expert. In addition, the Chu family had 4 other Dao controlling realm experts, but they had not reached the 7th transformation Dao controlling realm. They were 5th transformation, 3rd transformation, 2nd transformation, and 1st transformation. The person who had his arm cut off by Su Luan and fled in panic was a 1st transformation Dao controlling realm expert. Chen Zong was not afraid of 1st transformation, 2nd transformation, 3rd transformation, and 5th transformation. Even if it was a 7th transformation, Chen Zong dared to fight head-on. However, the Mountain River Star of the Chu family was surrounded by a Mountain River Great Array. That was a great void array. Even if it was the lowest level great void array, once it was activated, it would still have a shocking power. Of course, that kind of power would not be able to block the bombardment of the evanescent ship. It was because of this that Chernzong would go. However, Su Luan didn't know Chernzong's ability and insisted on going. This was because Su Luan was the city lord of the second city of Suppressing World. He was also the godson of the Yuan sect. No matter what, the Chu family didn't dare to offend him. With Su Luan accompanying him, even if something unexpected happened, Chernzong would be fine. Knowing Su Luan's thoughts, Chernzong didn't say he was very strong. That would be too much of a blow to Su Luan. He could only let Su Luan go with him. With Su Luan accompanying him, things were indeed much more convenient. He revealed his identity and directly entered the mountain river planet, heading toward the Chu family. This time, Chernzong came to settle his grudge with the Chu family. However, there were many ways to settle grudges. It didn't necessarily have to be a life-and-death battle. With Su Luan's name, the two directly entered the Chu family and received the highest level of welcome. Other than the 7th Cycle Dao controlling realm Grand Elder, who didn't show up, the other 4 Dao controlling realm cultivators all showed up. Last time, the 1st Cycle Dao controlling realm cultivator had an arm cut off by Su Luan. The Chu family was warned by Su Luan. At this moment, even if they had a lot of resentment and dissatisfaction in their hearts, they couldn't show it. They had to greet with a smile. There was no other way. Su Luan was the godson of the Yuan sect. He was also a Dao controlling realm cultivator. His talent was unparalleled in the Chu family. The Chu family had to bow their heads. Chu family, do you still remember me? Su Luan didn't speak, but Chernzong spoke. He was the leader of this trip, and Su Luan came with him. For a moment, the gazes of the Chu family's 4 Dao controlling realm cultivators all fell on Chernzong's face. Previously, Chernzong had restrained his aura and didn't have a strong sense of presence. In addition, Su Luan's identity and strength made the Chu family pay more attention to him, so much so that they ignored Chernzong. Now that they heard Chernzong's words, they immediately looked over and were slightly surprised. Because of Chu Shanha, everyone in the Chu family had seen Chernzong's appearance. There were clear images and pictures. However, they couldn't be sure at the moment. "It's you," the 1st Cycle Dao controlling realm cultivator said in a serious voice. A trace of unforgettable hatred flashed in his eyes. He remembered very clearly that back then, he was ordered to go to the Second World Suppressing City to recruit this person. In the end, he was rejected. When he was about to suppress him by force, Su Luan attacked and cut off one of his arms. If he hadn't fled quickly and decisively, and Su Luan was still far away, he probably wouldn't have been able to escape. At that time, it wouldn't have just been a matter of one of his arms being cut off. Even with the Chu family's resources, the arm had grown back. However, it wasn't as useful as before. Of course, it would take a lot of time to recover to its previous level. He hated Su Luan, but he didn't dare to show it. However, he didn't have so many scruples when hating a cultivator who wasn't even in the spirit realm. So what if the other party was a genius? As long as he hadn't broken through to the spirit realm, he was nothing. "It seems that you recognized me." Chernzong smiled slightly, not caring about the hatred in the other's eyes. In Chernzong's view, the 4 Dao controlling realm cultivators of the Chu family were no match for him. As long as he used his full strength, one sword strike would be enough to severely injure or even kill them. Perhaps only the Grand Elder of the 7th Transformation Dao controlling realm was qualified to be his opponent. However, he wasn't present. The Chu family has harmed me many times. This time, it's time to settle the score. Chernzong didn't have the slightest bit of politeness and said very directly. After all, he wasn't here as a guest, nor was he here to make friends with the Chu family. He was here to settle the grudges. Su Luan, is this what you want? The fifth transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator of the Chu family remained calm. His gaze swept past Chen Zong's face and landed on Su Luan's face. He asked in a serious voice. No, I'm just here to be a witness. Su Luan smiled slightly. However, I'll give you a suggestion. If Brother Chen has any requests, you'd better agree. It won't be bad for the Chu family. Su Luan's words immediately caused the expressions of the Chu family members to change greatly. They also noticed how Su Luan addressed Chen Zong. Brother Chen. How could this kind of address be used casually? If they weren't related by blood, how could a divine realm cultivator call a demigod realm cultivator brother, especially when the age difference wasn't that big? Of course, Su Luan's age was older than Chen Zong. What requests do you have? The fifth transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator of the Chu family didn't think that Su Luan was bluffing. He stared at Chen Zong and asked in a serious tone. 10 million void coins and we'll settle the score. Chen Zong smiled slightly. The expressions of the four Tao controlling realm cultivators of the Chu family changed greatly. 10 million void coins. What kind of wealth was that? Su Luan's expression was as usual. This was something she had discussed with Chen Zong on the way here. This number was indeed very shocking, but the Chu family could take it out. Simply put, the Chu family could take out 10 million void coins, but it would hurt them greatly. 10 million, it could be said that the Chu family was stuck at the juncture. And 10 million void coins was enough for Chen Zong to buy 1,000 high-grade void flaming crystals, which could be used on the escape ship. After all, the power of the star core wasn't endless. 3 million at most. The fifth transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator of the Chu family said directly. His tone was unquestionable. 3 million void coins was also a huge amount of wealth for the Chu family, but it wouldn't hurt them greatly. 3 million. Chen Zong smiled coldly. 12 million. Su Luan showed a trace of astonishment. 10 million was enough to hurt the Chu family. If 2 million was added, the Chu family would be in an even more difficult position. Hearing Chen Zong's words, the Chu family people's heads jumped, the veins on their foreheads bulging. From 10 million to 12 million, although the Chu family wouldn't give it, it was still very unpleasant and infuriating. Su Luan, you shouldn't interfere in this matter. Although the Chu family didn't want to offend Su Luan, they had their own principles. If the Chu family didn't go overboard, I wouldn't interfere. Su Luan said with a smile. He knew that Chen Zong's current cultivation wasn't any lower than his, and he even had a divine life weapon. Chen Zong's strength was absolutely not weak. He could even fight against the Chu clan's third cycle Tao controlling realm. More importantly, Chen Zong was still very young, and represented endless potential. In the end, we still have to fight. Chen Zong smiled slightly, and in an instant, the aura that was restrained burst out in an instant. An extremely shocking sword pressure also descended out of thin air, directly suppressing the four Tao controlling realm cultivators of the Chu family. Sword pressure. It was an astonishing sword pressure, an extremely tyrannical sword pressure, and an extremely terrifying power. The first transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator's expression changed drastically. He only felt that his body was unable to move, as if he was suppressed by a giant sword. An incomparably vigorous and sharp sword seemed to be piercing through and crushing him. The second transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator also felt the same, and was unable to move under Chen Zong's sword pressure. As for the third transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator, it was a little better, but he also felt the shocking pressure, and his entire body felt as if it was directly split open. Only the fifth transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator could withstand the suppression of Chen Zong's sword pressure. But the power of this sword pressure made his expression solemn, and he felt as if he was facing the pressure of a circulating Tao controlling realm cultivator. At the same time that the sword pressure was emitted, Chernzong's second transformation Tao controlling realm cultivation was also clearly displayed, and it made their hearts sink. It seemed that this person was only at the demigod realm before, but now, he was at the second transformation Tao controlling realm. What did this mean? It meant that he was an extremely shocking genius. Of course, if not, he would not have been accepted as a disciple of the Eastern Court Sword Mountain. The fifth transformation Tao controlling realm cultivator of the Chu family's expression changed, and he finally said, "The Chu family is willing to pay 13 million as compensation to you, sir. We are even now." The other party's talent and origin made him not dare to act rashly. The Eastern Court Sword Mountain. What a tyrannical existence! Even now, there were rumors that the Eastern Court Sword Mountain was in internal strife and had fallen apart. But a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, and it was not something that a star-level force like the Chu family could compare with. After thinking about it, they had to compromise. Otherwise, even if they killed the other party here, it would be very disadvantageous to the Chu family in the end. Chapter 2106. 10 million became 13 million. To Chernzong, it was a pleasant surprise, but to Chu family, it was a huge loss. Taking out 10 million void coins was already a huge loss to Chu family, not to mention an extra 3 million. Also, the extra 3 million was decided by Chu family's rank 5 Tao controlling realm expert. Why? Spending money to buy safety. If they couldn't kill, they would fight. Even if they won, they would have to pay a huge price, and they would be remembered by the other party. With the other party's talent, maybe after 100 years, when his cultivation was higher and stronger, Chu family wouldn't be able to stop him. For Chu family's development, they had to end the grudge. How to end it? The best way was to pay the corresponding price and admit defeat. Humiliation, unwillingness, anger. So what? Being weak was a sin. To many lone cultivators or small factions, Chu family was indeed strong, but to Yuan sect, Chu family was weak. Strength and weakness were always opposite, unless one had absolute power. For example, becoming a Tao Lord. Dominator-level experts had absolute power. Even if they were defeated, it was hard to kill them. Unless they were like Dong Ting Sword Master, who overestimated himself and tried to steal a small part of the Sword Tao's origin, and suffered a backlash and died. Chernzong's luck was very bad, and he planned to use True Spirit to take over his body, and ended up with his Tao disappearing. Compared to the depressed and sullen Chu family, Chernzong and Su Luan left with smiles on their faces. On the escape ship, Chernzong took out 3 million void coins to give to Su Luan. No matter what, Su Luan's following saved him a lot of effort. It was impossible for Su Luan to not be moved by 3 million void coins. It wasn't easy for him to earn 3 million void coins. But Su Luan refused. "Brother Chen, if you feel like you owe me, why don't you do me a favor?" Su Luan said. In the past, Chernzong was still sub-god level. Although Su Luan treated him as an equal, the gap was still there. But now, Chernzong wasn't inferior to Su Luan at all. Su Luan even felt that Chernzong's strength might surpass him. This was the true meaning of equality. Of course, at first, Su Luan thought highly of Chernzong because he wanted to befriend Chernzong and ask Chernzong for help in the future. However, he didn't expect Chernzong to improve so quickly. "Brother Su, please speak." Chernzong knew why Su Luan thought highly of him in the beginning. Of course, this was normal. Other than family, there was no such thing as love or hate for no reason. The friendship between friends at the beginning was either because they hit it off or because they thought highly of each other. The friendship between friends did not exist at the beginning. Instead, it deepened as they slowly came into contact with each other and recognized each other. Su Luan was a good person, and Chernzong approved of him. When a friend needed help, he naturally had to lend a helping hand. Even if he didn't have to sacrifice himself, at least he had to contribute to the best of his ability. The God-Son competition of the Unitary sect has reached its final stage. Su Luan explained to Chenzong. The Unitary sect had a sect master, 2 deputy sect masters and 3 palace masters. Among them, the sect master was a Yuan underworld powerhouse. As for the deputy sect masters and palace masters, they were all at the Dao manipulation realm. After all, the Unitary sect was just a low-level nebula-grade force. When Chenzong realized this, he was slightly startled. The Unitary sect, which had been extremely tyrannical in his eyes, was just SOSO now. Of course, this didn't mean that Chenzong was stronger than the Unitary sect. However, with the evanescent vessel in hand and sufficient power, the Unitary sect couldn't do anything to him. The Unitary sect had 6 godson, all of whom were at the spirit ascension or Dao manipulation realm. As godson, they were naturally candidates for the position of sect master, deputy sect master and palace master. However, whether they would become palace master and control a palace, deputy sect master and surpass the palace master, or sect master and control the entire Unitary sect would depend on the godson's ability. The godson competition had always been a tradition of the Unitary sect. The palace master, deputy sect master and sect master of any generation were all like this. Of course, the godson competition was only a preparation and would not really succeed the position. They had to wait until their cultivation base had increased to a sufficient level, which was at least the 7th revolution Dao manipulation realm, before they were qualified to succeed the position and become the new palace master, deputy sect master or even sect master. As for the previous generation's palace master, deputy sect master and sect master, they had 2 choices after abdicating. They could either enter seclusion for a long time and cultivate wholeheartedly or leave the Unitary sect and enter the void to travel and find opportunities to improve themselves. This time, the godson competition had reached its final stage. At present, the 6 godsons' assessment results were almost evenly matched. There was a difference, but it wasn't big. After all, none of them were simple. This was the final competition that would affect the final result. The final competition was for the 6th godson to obtain a treasure from the outside world within the 10-year time limit. There were no restrictions on what treasure it was, but it had to be a useful treasure. The final result of the competition would be based on the value of the treasure. 10 years wasn't considered long, but it wasn't short either. After all, it was a void year. There were still 2 years left before the end of the time limit. Su Luan was constantly collecting information and looking for treasures of higher value. The premise was that he had a chance of obtaining them. In the end, he chose 3 targets. One of his targets was a fruit guarded by a Yuan underworld star beast on a high-grade star. However, although the value of that fruit was very high, it was simply impossible to obtain it with a Yuan underworld star beast guarding it. After thinking about it, Su Luan knew that he simply couldn't obtain that fruit on his own. Of course, the Godson competition allowed external aid, but he didn't have the ability to get a Yuan underworld powerhouse to help him. Thus, he could only choose another target. The other target was relatively uncertain. It was a void secret realm that Su Luan had spent a lot of money to purchase information about. He had personally entered it once, but it was full of danger. He couldn't go deep with his own strength. If he hadn't withdrawn in time, he might have died inside. Although he hadn't gone deep, Su Luan had indeed obtained some treasures, which made him look forward to it even more. Originally, he had planned to bring his old servant, who was a third revolution Dao controlling realm old man, with him. He hadn't expected Chenzong to come. He realized that Chenzong wasn't weak and might even surpass him. Thus, he planned to ask Chenzong for help. Perhaps the two of them could join forces and explore more and obtain more valuable treasures. If it really didn't work, then he could only settle for the next target. The third target was the easiest to obtain, but it would be very difficult to achieve the best result. Chen Zong agreed to Su Luan's invitation without hesitation. Immediately, the void escape adjusted its direction. Now, Chen Zong had a huge sum of 13 million void coins on him. Of course, he had to first buy a batch of high-level and mid-level void crystals as a reserve. There was still some power left in the star core, which could be used to cultivate the sword path theurgy of the Eastern Court Sword Mountain Stellar Dao Academy. It didn't take long for Chen Zong to successfully purchase 1,000 pieces of high-grade flaming void crystals and 1,000 pieces of mid-grade flaming void crystals from a high-grade trade star. He also had 2 million void coins left for reserve. He activated the speed limit of the high-level void flying ship and then used the 10-year void travel. It only took a 10-year void travel and a few days of flying at the maximum speed of the high-level void flying ship to arrive at the void secret realm. There were secret realms in the world and stars. Some were natural, some were man-made. There were also secret realms in the void. Similarly, some mystic realms were artificially created, while others existed naturally. He didn't know what kind of secret realms Su Luan found. Any secret realm that hadn't been developed had shocking value. Of course, it also contained shocking danger. It's here. Su Luan remembered very clearly. Soon, they found the entrance to the secret realm. The entrance was set up by Su Luan and was hidden. However, Su Luan's expression changed slightly. "Brother Chen, the seal I set up has been touched." Chen Zong's eyes narrowed. This meant that someone else knew about this place, and had even entered the secret realm. Who had entered? It wasn't clear. It was unknown, and unknown could mean uncertain danger. Enter. Chen Zong didn't hesitate. Enter. Su Luan's tone was firm. Without hesitation, the two moved and immediately stepped into the secret realm. Their figures seemed to sink into the depths of the void and disappeared. This feeling was different from the void travel, but there was a similar feeling. Keeping their minds clear, Chen Zong and Su Luan landed one after another. The ground under their feet seemed to be the ground, but it also didn't seem to be. It seemed to be formed by countless auras. It was very strange. There was a very hard feeling, but there was also a soft feeling. It was like stepping on steel, but also like stepping on cotton. This strange feeling made Chen Zong and Su Luan very vigilant. Especially Chen Zong. It was his first time here, so he needed some time to adapt. However, Chen Zong's ability to adapt had always been very outstanding. In less than 10 breaths, he had completely adapted. This made Su Luan very surprised. If one couldn't adapt to the environment here, it would make it difficult to use one's strength. Once they encountered danger, they would be caught off guard. When Su Luan entered for the first time, she encountered such a situation. She originally planned to let Chen Zong experience it personally after entering, and then tell him. She didn't expect that before she said anything, Chen Zong had adapted in less than 10 breaths. It was really shocking. This couldn't help but give Su Luan even greater confidence. Perhaps this time, it was really possible to enter the depths of the secret realm and find amazing treasures. Then, she would be able to compete with the other 5 godsons and obtain the best result, directly obtaining the qualification to be the founder of a Yuan sect. With a deep expectation, Su Luan began to lead the way, following the route they walked last time. On the side, Su Luan also paid attention to the traces. Whether the person who entered followed this route or another route, whether the traces were relatively new or old, these could be used as a judgment. Chapter 2107. The voice was sharp and shrill. The moment it was heard by Chen Zong and Su Luan, 2 thin black lights had already shot towards them from the side. A creepy feeling swept over them, making Su Luan feel cold all over. "Brother Chen, be careful," Su Luan quickly shouted as he dodged. The first time he entered, He was ambushed. At that time, he barely managed to avoid it, but this time, it was much better. Chunzong had been warned by Su Luan before. Plus, Chunzong's perception was better than Su Luan's, so his reaction was even faster. Therefore, he reacted even faster and dodged the black light. He had a calm feeling. His eyes were sharp as he looked at where the black light came from. It was darkness. Even with Chunzong's amazing eyesight, he could only see a blur. As for Su Luan, all he could see was darkness. Although it was hard to see with his eyes, Chunzong could still catch it. Because of heart perception. Heart perception, the universal ability of Will Heavenly Palace, seemed simple, but it was unfathomable. Under heart perception, everything within 10,000 meters was clearly sensed by Chunzong. The person who attacked them in the dark was naturally caught by Chunzong. His body moved. The sword light was eerie as it instantly broke through the air. It was silent. Extremely fast. Su Luan only felt that there seemed to be an eerie light flashing in front of his eyes, then it returned to nothingness. He saw Chunzong's left hand grab at the air. A figure flew out from the darkness and landed in front of the two. It had the shape of a human, but it was not a human. Its body was covered in pitch-black scales. Compared to a human, its body was much taller and stronger. The structure of its body was beautiful, and it was filled with astonishing power. Its 10 fingers were like sharp claws, and the tips were extremely sharp, as if they contained a little bit of black cold light. This was a foreign race. It existed in the memories of Sword Master Dong Ting. The so-called alien race referred to the races other than the human race, the star beasts and the void beast. The void was vast and mysterious. It also gave birth to and inhabited countless creatures. These creatures were made up of many races. Of course, in the eyes of the human race, they were not part of the human race. Most of the outsiders didn't live in human territories. Instead, they had their own airspace. To put it simply, the east, west, north, south, and central voids were divided into the 5 major voids, which were only for the human race's territory. There was a small portion that didn't belong to the outsiders and was called the outer void by the human race. Naturally, the human race's territory was called the inner void. For example, the ancient Shura clan that Chun Xiu had inherited the divine Wraith Azura battle technique was one of the alien races in the void. In the memories of Sword Master Dong Ting, there were at least a few hundred alien races in the void. It was possible that some of them had not been discovered. The ancient Shura clan was one of the most powerful alien clans. Their combat strength was amazing, and they could be ranked in the top 10 of the alien clans. As for the alien in front of him, Chunzong carefully searched Sword Master Dong Ting's memories to see if he had seen him before. After all, Sword Master Dong Ting was a Dominator rank expert. He had lived for many years and had seen many things. Not long after, Chunzong found information similar to the alien in front of him. After confirming it several times, he was certain. This is the Black Scale Clan, a branch of the Sacred Scale Clan. Their black scales are tough and have excellent defense. They can be used to make divine armors. Chunzong retrieved Sword Master Dong Ting's memories and said slowly, "The Black Scale Clan is agile and fast. They are good at explosive attacks. The tips of their fingers can shoot out black needles. Once hit, they will lose all their strength." Su Luan, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. How did Chunzong know so much? The void was vast and filled with countless mysteries. No one knew everything about it. Normally, it was cultivators who cultivated and traveled while increasing their knowledge, constantly accumulating their knowledge. A truly brilliant cultivator was never someone with a brain full of muscles. They also needed to have profound knowledge. Otherwise, when they encountered a situation, they would be confused and unable to make a judgment. Sometimes, it was inevitable that they would miss a good opportunity and even lead themselves to death. Su Luan thought that she was older and more knowledgeable. After all, Chernzong was a cultivator from a remote star. The time he spent in the void could not be compared to her. But what was going on now? She could only confirm that this was an alien clan, but he could say the name of the alien clan and all kinds of information. The difference? Su Luan could not help but smile bitterly. It seemed that not only was her talent not as good as his, even her knowledge was not as good. Then, Chernzong showed off his peerless skinning skills. The Black Scale Clan's scales were good materials to make divine armors. Even if he did not need it, he could sell it and get a lot of void coins. Void coins were very useful. They could be used to cultivate by void flaming crystals and other treasures. It was the real currency in the void. In just a few breaths, Chernzong peeled off the Black Scale Clan's scales and said to Su Luan with a smile, "Brother Su, I'll keep it first. After we leave, I'll exchange it for void coins and divide it equally." Su Luan shook her head and said, "This Black Scale Clan's member was killed by you. It should be yours." Chernzong did not say much. This kind of distribution was undoubtedly the easiest. Whoever killed the Black Scale Clan's member would get it. If they attacked together, then they would divide it. As for whether it was cruel or not, Chernzong did not think so. Alien clans were not humans. Although they had intelligence and their civilization inheritance, they were not humans. Similarly, the majority of the foreign races had the same attitude towards the human race. Some of them would even slaughter the human race like livestock and treat them as food. Since there's a Black Scale Clan here, maybe it's the habitat of a Black Scale Clan. Chernzong smiled and said, "If that's the case, we'll probably have a good harvest this time." The scale armor of the Black Scale Clan was indeed valuable, but that was only relatively speaking. Unless there were hundreds or even thousands of scale armors, it would be of great help to Su Luan in the Godson competition. A flame spread out and instantly burned the skinned Black Scale Clan's member into ashes. This flame was the mysterious fire of heaven that Chernzong had mastered. Now that it had broken through, it had become a godly fire. Of course, it was the lowest level godly fire. Its power was very limited. It did not have any effect on Chernzong's strength, but it was good for destroying corpses. As Chernzong had guessed, this secret realm was a habitat of the Black Scale Clan. In addition to the Black Scale Clan, Chernzong and Su Luan also found some special ores called the Thousand Scale Stone. It was a kind of ore that was completely black and seemed to have many scales on its surface. It was also a casting material that could be integrated into the Black Scale Clan's scales to make godly armors. Of course, the Thousand Scale Stone was also a cultivation resource used by the Black Scale Clan. By absorbing the power of the Thousand Scale Stone, they could improve themselves. The Void alien clans were different from humans. Innately speaking, humans were weak and could not be compared to the alien clans. This was because most of the alien clans were born with extraordinary power, while most of the humans did not have much power at birth. They were very weak. Take the Black Scale Clan for example. The Black Scale Clan members had extraordinary power when they were born. Their level was equivalent to a human half-step great saint. When they were children, they were equivalent to a demigod. Once they reached adulthood, the Black Scale Clan members would have the power of the Dao manipulation realm. In addition to the Thousand Scale Stone, the two also found some strange herbs and fruits that were also related to the Black Scale Clan. They were the Scale Blade Grass and the Black Scale Fruit, which were necessary for the Black Scale Clan to grow stronger. They were also useful to humans. The Scale Blade Grass could be used to make weapons. As for the Black Scale Fruit, it was a kind of spiritual fruit that could be eaten directly. According to Sword Master Dong Ting's memory, the taste of the Black Scale Fruit was a little strange. Those who liked it would like it very much, and those who did not would dislike it very much. After eating the Black Scale Fruit, it could also have a strengthening effect on the body. Eating more would form a layer of black scale power at the bottom of the skin. After it was stimulated, It would form a layer of black scale power that would cover the skin and strengthen the body's defense. The black scale fruit was the size of a fist, and its surface was covered with black scales. It looked very rough and very hard, like a rock. When Chernzong and Sulwan quickly picked the black scale fruit from a huge fruit tree, a group of black scale clan members also approached. Anger. When this small team of 5 black scale tribe members saw that there was an alien picking the black scale fruit that belonged to them, their anger and murderous intent surged up and exploded in an instant. Letting out a series of unknown screams and roars, the 5 black scale clan members all released a shocking aura, carrying anger and terrifying killing intent as they approached. Chernzong already knew about the appearance of the 5 black scale clan members, but Sulwan was a little slower. As the 5 members of the black scale tribe unleashed their terrifying power, chain-like runes began to appear on their bodies. That was the symbol of the black scale clan's strength. A chain pattern represented the strength of a first transition practitioner. Of the 5 black scale clan members, 2 were rank 1, 2 were rank 2, and 1 was rank 3. Chernzong had already told this information to Sulwan. Thus, Sulwan's expression changed greatly. "Brother Chen, quickly retreat!" Sulwan quickly shouted. After all, 2 rank 1, 2 rank 2, and 1 rank 3 black scale clan members weren't weak, they were very strong. Other clans were naturally strong, this was something that humans couldn't compare to. However, the weakness of other clans was also very obvious. Most of them were born strong and had great talent, but there was a limit. For example, the Black Scale clan's limit was the peak of the Dao manipulation realm. If they broke through, it would be another level. Moreover, it was very difficult to break through. Comparatively speaking, it was much easier for humans to break through from the Dao manipulation realm to the Yuanming realm. Similarly, a rank 1 Black Scale clan member would be stronger than most humans. Sulwan clearly didn't realize Chernzong's strength correctly. No matter. Hearing Sulwan's voice, Chernzong smiled slightly. The strongest was only rank 3, he wasn't a match at all. Attack. The extreme heart phaseless sword instantly attacked. The sword light flashed, and in that instant, it directly streaked across the sky, tearing apart the dim light. Chapter 2108. Tear. Pierce through. Like a hot knife through butter. Invincible. The sword light refracted and jumped. With one sword, it pierced through 5 members of the Black Scale tribe. Sulwan, who was using his full power to summon his divine weapon, was gathering all the power in his body and pouring it into his divine wheel that was spinning non-stop. He was ready to make a powerful attack and then immediately retreat. However, he was suddenly stunned. One sword. With just one slash, he had killed 5 of the powerful Black Scale tribe members. It was simply unbelievable. Previously, Sulwan felt that Chernzong's current strength might have surpassed him. However, he was also confident that even if he had surpassed him, it would not be by too much. Now, he knew that Chernzong was not only stronger than him, but also by a lot. Sulwan did not have the confidence to defeat the 3rd transition member of the Black Scale tribe. However, he could not stop Chernzong's sword. The gap between them was huge. After being shocked, a feeling of joy suddenly emerged from Sulwan's heart. Perhaps with Chernzong's help, he could achieve his goal on this trip. After killing 5 members of the Black Scale tribe with one sword, Chernzong was at ease. His sword light flashed and sword chi surrounded him. Instantly, with a very skilled and exquisite technique, he peeled off the scales of the 5 members of the Black Scale tribe. As for the corpses, he burned them with his divine fire and burned them to ashes. The 5 members of the Black Scale tribe were killed by Chernzong. The scales belonged to Chernzong. Sulwan was a little envious but did not say anything. His biggest goal was to obtain valuable treasures. As for other things, he would not think about them for now. If he could get them, He would get them. If he could not, it did not matter. There were hundreds of black scale fruits on the tree. However, only a few dozen were ripe. The unripe ones were worthless. Dozens of ripe black scale fruits were picked by Chunzong and Su Luan one after another. As he did not feel any danger approaching, Chunzong picked up a black scale fruit and bit it. The outer skin of the black scale fruit was very tough. Normal swords could not cut it at all. Even half-step Supreme Saint cultivators could not do anything to it. However, to the Spirit Realm warriors, this hardness was nothing. They could bite it open easily. There was no pulp inside, only black juice. He swallowed the juice in one gulp. It was a little spicy, a little stimulating, and seemed to have a rusty taste. All in all, Chunzong didn't think it tasted good, but it was still acceptable. As the juice flowed down his throat, it immediately turned into waves of hot air that quickly spread out, directly surging towards his bones, muscles, and so on. After that, it entrenched and flowed between his skin. The world god physique revolved, and in an instant, Chunzong refined and absorbed the black scale fruit juice's energy. For body refinement cultivators, this black scale fruit could be considered a pretty good body refinement divine medicine. It had the effect of assisting cultivation. After completely refining it, it could be used to improve one's body refinement cultivation. It would not form a black scale defense. However, to non-body refining cultivators, they could only absorb it and not refine it directly. Thus, a layer of black scales would form on their skin to protect them, increasing their defensive capabilities. For example, Su Luan was like this. There was no doubt that the black scale fruit was a divine medicine that could increase one's defense. It could increase one's ability to survive and protect oneself. Chunzong ate one black scale fruit after another. As the world god physique revolved, it kept refining and absorbing, turning into nutrient. It slowly increased the world god physique's power and level, gradually approaching the third transformation. However, Su Luan had no choice. After eating 5 black scale fruits, Su Luan felt that she couldn't eat anymore. Her body had a feeling of bloating, as if she was about to be stuffed. This was because he didn't refine his body and didn't have a godly physique. His ability to absorb and digest was limited. He had to wait for a while before he could continue eating. Digesting was different from refining. Thus, seeing Chunzong eat one black scale fruit after another without the feeling of being stuffed, Su Luan envied him from the bottom of her heart. "Sai, we're both in the second transformation Tao controlling realm. We're both in the younger generation. Why are you so much better than me?" Chunzong didn't know Su Luan's feelings and envy. She almost hated him with jealousy. It didn't take long for Chunzong to refine all 30 black scale fruit. Chunzong could feel that his body's strength had increased by a bit. The world god physique contained the great Tao of the world, and the great Tao of the world was transformed from the supreme Tao of the world. In essence, it belonged to the top great Tao of the void. The godly physique forged from it was much stronger than most great Tao. However, at the same time, it was more difficult to improve such a powerful godly physique. It would consume more resources. It was estimated that the 30 black scale fruits were enough to improve an ordinary godly physique from the second transformation to the peak of the second transformation. However, Chunzong's world god physique only improved a little. The difference in foundation was too obvious. Looking at the hundreds of unripe black scale fruits, Chunzong couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Unfortunately, the black scale fruits could only survive and bear fruit in the black scale tribe's territory. If they were uprooted and taken away, they would get unripe black scale fruits that didn't have any value. In that case, they could only give up. Continuing forward, Chunzong also found traces not left by the black scale tribe. It was very subtle, but under Chunzong's perception, it couldn't hide. "Brother Su, other than us, there are indeed others who have entered this place." Chen Zong transmitted his voice to Su Luan. Su Luan was shocked when she heard this. She quickly observed carefully. Indeed, she found some clues. As such, they had to be more careful because they didn't know who had entered this place. Interestingly, along the way, the two didn't find any other black-scale tribe corpses. They didn't know if those who had entered earlier weren't discovered or for some other reason. However, this peace was broken not long after. As Chen Zong and Su Luan continued to go deeper and deeper, they kept getting scale blade grass and black scale fruit. Finally, they felt a violent wave coming. There was an intense battle happening in front of them. Not long after, Chen Zong and Su Luan saw a group of black-scale tribe besieging a black-robed elder. The black-robed elder wasn't weak at all. His aura had reached the 5th transformation Dao manipulation realm. However, there were more than a dozen black-scale tribe besieging him. A few of them were 4th transformation black-scale tribe, while the rest were 2nd and 3rd transformation black-scale tribe. The dozen black-scale tribe members cooperated with each other very well. Immediately, the 5th transformation Dao manipulation realm black-robed elder could only defend. Even if he fought back, he couldn't do much damage to the black-scale tribe. Brothers, I'm the elder of a top star rank force, the Yu clan. Please help me. The black-robed elder also noticed the arrival of Chen Zong and Su Luan and quickly asked for help. The Yu clan is located in the airspace of the first suppressing world city. It's the strongest star rank force in the Yuan galaxy. Su Luan immediately transmitted her voice to Chen Zong. As a star rank force in the Yuan galaxy, they had to provide resources to the Yuan sect according to the stipulated time. What they received was the protection of the Yuan sect. Hence, since this person was from the Yu clan, and Su Luan was the godson of the Yuan sect, she had the obligation to help him. However, Su Luan alone wasn't enough. Chen Zong also made a move. However, Chen Zong didn't display his full strength. He only controlled it to be stronger than 3rd transformation realm, but not 4th transformation realm. The Yu clan elder acted as the main force. Su Luan summoned her divine weapon to restrain 2 2nd transformation black-scale tribe members. Chen Zong attacked with his sword to restrain 2 3rd transformation black-scale tribe members. This way, they shared some of the pressure on the Yu clan elder. Explode. Kill. The Yu clan elder seized the opportunity when the black-scale tribe's joint attack was broken. He directly used his full strength and unleashed a powerful attack. A black spear ray condensed and instantly pierced through the void. The power condensed and completely exploded when it hit a 4th transformation black-scale tribe member. Previously, this move would be continuously weakened by the black-scale tribe members working together. In the end, it couldn't cause any obvious injuries. However, now that the opportunity was grasped, it immediately dealt a heavy blow to the 4th transformation black-scale tribe member. It exploded again and heavily injured another 4th transformation black-scale tribe member. The 3rd explosion directly killed the 3rd 4th transformation black-scale tribe member. Chen Zong effortlessly restrained the 2 3rd transformation black-scale tribe members and even had the upper hand. However, Su Luan clearly had a hard time restraining the 2 2nd transformation black-scale tribe members. The Yu clan elder continued to explode and finally killed all the black-scale tribe members. Chen Zong also killed the 2 3rd transformation black-scale tribe members and assisted Su Luan in killing 2 2nd transformation black-scale tribe members. The dozen black-scale tribe members all died. Many thanks, Dao friends. This old man is Yu clan's 2nd elder, Yu Tianming. The black-robed old man took out pills and ate them while thanking Chen Zong and Su Luan. He looked very sincere. In order to thank you for your help, these black-scale tribe scales will belong to you. Chen Zong and Su Luan did not stand on ceremony and quickly took off the black-scale tribe's scales. As for Yu Tianming, after knowing that Su Luan was Yuan sect's disciple, he immediately relaxed. He asked the two to guard him for a while to speed up the refinement of the pills and recover his strength. Chen Zong and Su Luan did not leave. After Yu Tianming refined the pills, they started chatting. Yu Tianming had entered earlier, but it was after Su Luan entered for the first time. Su Luan wanted to know why Yu Tianming knew about this place, but Yu Tianming said he found it by coincidence. Su Luan was speechless because he spent a lot of time, energy, and money to find all kinds of information. He even personally went to find it and spent a lot of time to find the entrance to the secret realm. His luck was not as good as Yu Tianming's. Luckily, Yu Tianming found it by luck and did not leak any other information. Otherwise, there would be more competitors. Chen Zong didn't say anything and just quietly listened. Then, Yu Tianming proposed the idea of the three of them working together. Su Luan didn't immediately agree. Instead, he asked Chen Zong, "Brother Chen, what do you think?" "You decide," Chen Zong replied. He was invited by Su Luan to help, not to make the decision. Elder Yu, I need the most valuable treasure in this secret realm. If you agree, we will work together, Su Luan said with an unwavering tone. Dao Disciple Su, are you going through the final exam of the Dao Disciple competition? Yu Tianming asked. It seemed like he was well informed. That's right, Su Luan said. Yu Tianming didn't hesitate and immediately said, Yes, I agree. In the future, I hope Dao Disciple Su can take care of my Yu clan. Chapter 2109. This mystic realm was the habitat of the Black Scale Tribe, and the Black Scale Tribe was at the Dao Manipulation Realm. This was because the Black Scale Tribe at the Yuan Underworld Realm wasn't called the Black Scale Tribe anymore. They would undergo a transformation and leave this place. This was because the Black Scale Tribe was a branch of the Sacred Scale Tribe. After continuous transformation and evolution, they would eventually become the Sacred Scale Tribe. In Sword Master Dongting's memory, the Sacred Scale Tribe was a powerful tribe at the Dao Master level. Chen Zong, Su Luan, and the Yu family elder Yu Tianming, who was at the 5th Transformation Dao Manipulation Realm, temporarily joined forces and continued forward. However, after obtaining Su Luan's permission, Yu Tianming collected the skinned corpses of the Black Scale Tribe members. According to him, he wanted to bring them back to feed the star beasts of the Black Scale Tribe. Su Luan and Chen Zong didn't object to this. 1,000 scale stones, scale blade grass, and black scale fruit. The three of them would gain something every time they discovered them. Of course, when they encountered the Black Scale Tribe members, a battle would break out. When they encountered a 6th Transformation Black Scale Tribe member, the three of them joined forces and Yu Tianming used a secret technique to finally kill him. However, the three of them were also injured and had to rest for a while. Fortunately, although this was the habitat of the Black Scale Tribe, there didn't seem to be many of them. After recovering from their injuries and strength, the three of them continued forward. After that, they didn't encounter any Black Scale Tribe members above the 5th Transformation. Go deeper. The three of them joined forces and restrained their auras as they stepped into the depths of the secret realm. The Black Scale Tribe is gathering in the depths. It seems that something big is happening, Yu Tianming transmitted. No wonder there weren't many Black Scale Tribe members in the periphery, and they weren't very strong. If a large number of Black Scale Tribe members were gathering in the depths, something big must have happened. What was it? The three of them immediately discussed and decided to take the risk and go deeper. Wealth came from danger. Each of them had their own life-saving method. They restrained their auras and slowly sneaked in. Chen Zong and the others also saw it. In the depths there was a 10-meter-wide circular platform. It seemed to be an altar, and there were thousands of black scale fruits on it. After waking up, Chen Zong had eaten more than 100 black scale fruit. His world-divine body was also gradually approaching the peak of the 2nd transformation. Moreover, the thousands of black-scaled fruits were all ripe, which made Chen Zong envious. If he could eat most of them, his world-divine body would definitely be upgraded to the peak of rank 2. At that time, he would be able to further understand the mysteries of the great Tao of the world and break through to rank 3, becoming even more powerful. However, Chen Zong did not move. This was because there were hundreds of black-scale tribe members gathered around the 10-meter black-scale altar. When the black-scale tribe members did not unleash their full power, their scales would not appear, so it was hard to tell which rank they were at. However, Chen Zong could roughly sense it with his godly senses. Among the hundreds of people from the black-scale tribe, there were more than a dozen who gave Chen Zong a strong sense of crisis. Chen Zong estimated that these dozen or so black-scale clansmen were all rank 7 and above. In addition, there were also some black-scale clansmen who gave him a sense of threat. The other black-scale clansmen were not weak either. Chen Zong secretly estimated that the lowest level of the black-scale tribe members should not be lower than rank 4 Tao controlling realm. This was undoubtedly shocking. Once they were discovered, the three of them would be in trouble. Under the leadership of the black-scale tribe member, who was the tallest and strongest among them, his body was covered in pure black scales. There was even a trace of purple light flashing across his body. Hundreds of black-scale tribe members surrounded the black-scale altar. They raised their hands up high with a devout look on their faces. They seemed to be chanting something. Hundreds of black-scale clansmen were chanting together. Their voices converged into one and gradually became louder. It felt as if they were performing some kind of ritual, as if they were worshipping a god. Chen Zong watched while searching the memories of Sword Master Dong Ting and the black-scale tribe. Finally, he found it because Sword Master Dong Ting had seen it before. This was indeed some kind of ritual, but it was not worshipping a god. The strange chanting became louder and louder. Next, the black scales on the altar glowed brightly, wrapping around thousands of ripe black scale fruit. They kept shining, and the black scale fruit in the center flew into the air. Immediately after, streams of black aura flew out from the surrounding black scale fruits and quickly spread towards the black scale fruit in the center, entering it. As it continued to absorb the aura of the surrounding black scale fruits, the black scale fruit in the center began to emit a dim light. Each scale was expanding, causing the entire black scale fruit to continue to grow. But after the other black scale fruits emitted the aura, they rapidly shrank. They did not shrink, but became dry and dim, as if they had lost their moisture. They were hollowed out. Su Luan did not understand what was going on, but she also felt that something incredible was happening. When thousands of black scale fruits became dry and shriveled, the black scale fruit in the center grew more than 10 times. From the size of a fist, it became a giant black scale fruit that was bigger than a human head. However, the chanting continued. As the giant black scale fruit spun, it emitted a black light and its color gradually changed. Traces of purple light swam within the black light and gradually grew stronger, gradually replacing the black light. The purple light flickered. Although it was a little faint, it completely replaced the black light. The aura it emitted had reached a whole new level. In that instant, Yu Tianming's eyes shone brightly, but it disappeared in a flash. The purple light began to recede, and the black scale fruit also began to shrink. As it shrank, the color of the black scales gradually changed to purple. Purple scale fruit. Chen Zong's pupils shrank. If the black scale tribe evolved, they would become the purple scale tribe, which was equivalent to the Yuan underworld realm. The purple-scaled fruit was of a higher level than the black-scaled fruit. If the black-scale tribe members grew to the peak and wanted to break through, they would have to undergo a life transformation. Consuming the purple-scale fruit was one of the ways. Obviously, the most powerful member of the black-scale clan, who had a faint purple glow on his body, had already stepped on the path of transformation. However, if he wanted to truly transform, he would have to spend a lot of time on his own. If he consumed a purple scale fruit, he would be able to successfully transform in a short time and become a member of the purple scale tribe. It was no wonder that they could enter the depths so easily. Most of the powerful black scale tribe members were gathered at the altar in the depths, which was why they were able to enter unimpeded. Although Su Luan wasn't very clear, she understood that the value of the purple scale fruit was definitely very shocking. That is the purple scale fruit. It is a treasure that can allow the black scale tribe to transform. It should be the most valuable treasure here. Yu Tianming's voice rang out in Chunzong and Su Luan's ears. According to the previous agreement, the purple scale fruit belongs to Su Luan. How about this? I will make a move first and lure the black scale tribe away. This will give you an opportunity to take the purple scale fruit. Yu Tianming's way of doing things could be said to be a good example. Of course, on the way here, he was also like this. According to Su Luan's understanding, the Yu family's second elder was very good. He was one of the few good people among the cultivators. After saying this, before Chen Zong and Su Luan could reply, Yu Tianming's body flashed. He instantly turned into a ray of black light and flew out. At the same time, he exploded with shocking power. With a boom, Yu Tianming also stabbed out with his spear. It was like a ray of black lightning that pierced through the sky. It violently shot out as if it had pierced through the sun and moon. The black spear continued forward, as if it was going to shatter everything. The outermost black scale tribe member couldn't react in time and was instantly pierced by the spear and died. After killing a black scale tribe member with one spear, Yu Tianming didn't stupidly charge into the black scale tribe. Instead, he turned in the air and quickly flew to the side. He decisively wanted to lure the black scale tribe members away to create an opportunity for Chen Zong and Su Luan. The leader of the black scale tribe members let out an angry roar. His killing intent soared. Immediately, the other black scale tribe members all moved and chased after him. However, Yu Tianming, who used his secret method, was especially powerful. Originally, Yu Tianming's strength had reached rank 5 peak stage. After using his secret method, he could be considered to have reached rank 6. After killing another 2 black scale tribe members, he killed his way out of the small encirclement. After killing 2 rank 4 and 1 rank 5 black scale tribe members, he had completely angered the black scale tribe members. More black scale tribe members erupted with shocking power and immediately chased after him. Scales coiled around him like chains. The strongest black scale tribe members had 9 scales around their bodies. They faintly flashed with traces of purple. Although it was very weak, it emitted an extremely terrifying aura. Most of the black scale tribe members were lured away by Yu Tianming. However, there were still a few black scale tribe members who didn't chase after him. Instead, they guarded beside the altar and waited for the purple scale fruit to be completed. Thus, Yu Tianming's sacrifice didn't have much effect. Brother Chen, that purple scale fruit is very useful to me. Can you give it to me? Su Luan's eyes shined brightly. This purple scale fruit's value was definitely very high. It would be of great use to his godson. Sure. Chen Zong didn't hesitate. Although this purple scale fruit might allow his world body to reach the peak of the second transformation, it would be difficult for him to break through to the third transformation. This was because the breakthrough required him to comprehend the mysteries of the Great Tao. In addition, Chen Zong had accompanied Su Luan since the beginning. The purple scale fruit should belong to Su Luan. Many thanks. Su Luan thanked him solemnly and then said, I once obtained a secret treasure that can be used multiple times. It can also be used once to resist attacks below the Yuan underworld realm for a certain period of time. I will use this secret treasure to protect myself and attract the attention of the remaining black scale tribe members. Brother Chen, do you have confidence in obtaining the purple scale fruit? Whether or not he could obtain it was still unknown, but he could only take a gamble. Now that most of the Black Scale tribe members had been lured away by Yu Tianming, the pressure and difficulty of the two had decreased. Su Luan took out the final protective secret treasure. After using it, the secret treasure would be destroyed. If they couldn't obtain the purple scale fruit, the loss would be shocking. I will obtain it. Chen Zong's tone was very certain, which made Su Luan believe him. Okay, then I'll have to trouble Brother Chen. With a trace of joy, Su Luan's eyes flashed with determination. She exploded and turned into a stream of light, flying towards the Black Scale tribe members. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.